Thank you guys for joining our Krav Maga class. You guys can stay tuned and check out our Facebook and YouTube page and learn more Krav Maga tips and lessons. Thank you.
Imagine earning your master's degree on top of Mount Carmel, where forest meets sea and where every day brings a new cultural, academic, and personal adventure. This is the multi-experience at Haifa International. Here, students from around the world live and learn together in Israel's most culturally diverse city, meeting new people, discovering new perspectives, and shaping their own Israel experience.
There's people from different countries, from different religions and different languages. Somehow we are all very similar.
At Haifa, academics meet real life. You don't just study, you experience Israel up close, explore Haifa's mountain ocean city life, and build global friendships that last a lifetime.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience. It opens your mind, your network, and your world.
Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Israel's only English news channel, bringing you the headlines that matter every hour, straight from the center of where it's all unfolding.
From social media influencers to online podcasters, false and inflammatory claims about the Talmud are once again circulating widely. Joining us now in studio is Rabbi Daniel Rowe, who is taking on these accusations head on and explaining why they're both false and dangerous. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
So, Rabbi Rowe, we're seeing a sudden wave of online attacks claiming that the Talmud promotes immoral or violent behavior. What is actually happening right now in the digital space, and why did you feel it was urgent to respond?
Yeah, so it seems that since October 7th, there's been this wave of attempts to attack Israel, attack Jewish people, and one of them has been about the religion. Like, we saw it when Netanyahu gave a speech a few weeks after October 7th and said the phrase, "Remember what Amalek did," which every Jew recognizes. It means never forget when we're attacked. But anti-people latch on that and say, oh, he's referring to Samuel chapter 15 when they went to war against Amalek and is genocidal. The same thing's happening with Talmud. They're going to old quotes that have been long debunked, trying to cherry-pick them, stick them all over social media and say secretly these Jewish people are into killing non-Jews and hating non-Jews. I felt the need to respond when people started reaching out to me, Jews and allies who say we can defend Israel, but we don't know how to defend this. We don't know the Talmud. Right. And so now I put out a bunch of videos that people can use as a resource to know what's really going on and where these are false and made up and so on, or where they're just out of context or whatever it is.
It seems so ridiculous, but so important to do this. So now you show that many of these accusations are not new at all, but actually recycled, like you say, recycled medieval polemics that were already debunked centuries ago, like you say. Why do you think these fabrications keep resurfacing? And why are they so effective in today's social media environment?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, the real story is crazy. It's 1871. There was a Vienna professor called August Rohling. He literally published a thing called the Talmudic Jew. He ended up in a court case against the rabbi called Rabbi Bloch, and the court didn't know what to do. They appointed 2 Christian experts who spent 2 years researching, found it was all either fake or out of context. Rohling withdrew, he lost his job, but it was always recycling. Julius Streicher was Hitler's big minister of information. He loved these quotes because it's so easy. A quote, it sounds sincere, sounds real, makes Jews look terrible. After World War II, it went into kind of the Nazi circles, the edge of the web. Since the war began, they've been thrown, whether it's Qatari funding or bots or who knows what, this is like moved in heavily in. And yeah, they're so effective because you believe a quote. It says that sometimes even the line, if you look it up, is actually a true line. Just the context is nothing to do with what it sounds like. So they're extremely effective on social media, and they're playing into this narrative of the Jewish monsters.
And so beyond correcting the bad information, what are real-world dangers? What are the dangers that these distortions pose when they frame Jews as following these secret or perverse laws? What does that mean for broader conversations about anti-Semitism?
Yeah, it absolutely plays into anti-Semitic narratives. The truth is, even if they weren't there, this stuff of the Jews like looking nice on the surface, but secretly having this malicious intent is always at the center of anti-Semitic tales. So this just feeds into that. And yes, it's extremely dangerous. It can lead to, apart from demonization of Israel, it can lead to violence against Jews all over the world.
Now, you argue that these attacks often present themselves as ideological critiques rather than anti-Semitism. Why is that distinction misleading? And how should journalists and viewers recognize the difference?
Yeah, so first of all, anti-Semitism is typically like, oh, if we're not racist against Jews, like, I wouldn't, I defend your right to keep your religion, then I can't be anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic is this kind of social pathology of Jew demonization. And this stuff is the perfect weapon of Jew demonization. You see, you can't attack the Bible because Christians believe in the Bible, but you can attack the Talmud, and most people never read it, don't know it. And so journalists or anyone just seeing this stuff online should find people who know what they're talking about. Don't take our word for it, but allow us to walk you through. First of all, you'll find about a third of the quotes are literally made up nonsense. Another third are just radically out of context, like literally, there's a line, for example, that in the middle of the Egyptians pursuing the Israelites into the sea, a rabbi says the best of them should be killed. Take that line out of context, the best of all non-Jews should be killed. It's absurd, but you need to see the context. Then you need to see Talmud is extremely complex, right? Large, you can debate something for pages. You could literally have a hypothesis that's rejected. There's a very famous one. There's a hypothesis, could it be okay to steal from a non-Jew? And it's rejected. But if you take the hypothesis, so let somebody show you through, let's see them what's really going on, and almost all of these will just dissolve. Judaism is a religion that believes in the value of all human beings. The Talmud says all human beings are created in the image of God and are beloved. That's what we believe. And the attempt to demonize us is a part of this broader attempt to paint Jews as demons.
Well, Rabbi Rowe, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Caleb Ben David, and we're coming to you live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines from across the region. It's currently a little past 7 a.m. in New York City and a few minutes past 2 p.m. here in Israel. And here are the latest developments at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued one of his toughest warnings yet to Iran, saying if the Islamic Republic attempts to assassinate him, the United States would respond so forcefully that Iran would be wiped off the face of this earth.
They shouldn't be doing it, but I've left notification. Anything ever happens, we're going to blow the whole country is going to get blown up. So we've... originally Biden should have said something, when they made a statement. We always said Why isn't Biden saying anything? Because he didn't. But a president has to defend a president. Like if I were here and they were making that threat to somebody, not even a president, but somebody, like they did with me, I would absolutely hit them so hard. But I have very firm instructions. Anything happens, they're going to wipe them off the face of this earth.
Now, Trump's comments follow recent reports that Iran warned him against any action to be taken against the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, calling such steps a cause for total war. Now, while Trump said strong military options remain available, he has not ordered a strike, and it remains unclear at this point just how far Washington is willing to go if Iran's leadership continues to threaten American leaders and to massacre its own people who are opposing the Ayatollah's regime. Meanwhile, the U.S. continues its buildup of military forces in the region, with the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln expected to arrive later this week in Mideast waters. And let's turn now to Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted President Trump's invitation to join the newly formed Board of Peace. This according to a statement from the Prime Minister's office. Now, this initiative, led and chaired for life by President Trump, is aimed at resolving global conflicts with an initial focus on the Gaza Strip. Now, Israel will join Argentina, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Egypt, Hungary, Kazakhstan, Morocco, the UAE, Kosovo, and Vietnam in accepting the invitation. Sweden, Norway, and France have rejected joining, while other nations are weighing the offer, some reportedly concerned over an invitation extended to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, the Board of Peace is supposed to oversee the executive board administering Gaza, which does include officials from Turkey and Qatar, this despite Israel's objections to their inclusion. Diplomats have warned that the new Board of Peace could undermine the role of the United Nations, but its supporters say it could offer a new path for resolving international conflicts. Now, speaking to reporters about those concerns, Trump denounced the role of the UN as unhelpful.
Do you want your Board of Peace to replace the UN?
Well, it might. I mean, the UN just hasn't been very helpful. I'm a big fan of the UN potential, but it has never lived up to its potential. The UN should have settled every one of the wars that I settled. I never went to them. I never even thought to go to them. They should be able to settle those wars. They don't. I believe you got to let the UN continue because the potential is so great.
Now, the president is pushing to move ahead with phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire. This is senior Israeli officials say the current stalemate is helping Hamas, not Israel. They warn that the current pause allows Hamas to receive aid and funding, rebuild military capabilities, and deepen its control over Gaza's population. Those officials say phase 2 would require Hamas to disarm and to dismantle its military infrastructure, a demand they believe Hamas is unlikely to accept in the end. Then Hamas would be given a deadline, after which Israel would return to military action. Israeli officials also stressed that no outside actors can enforce Gaza's demilitarization, and that if Hamas refuses to disarm, the IDF will ultimately have to enforce it on its own. Meanwhile, Hamas has yet to return the body of the last remaining hostage, Sergeant Ron Gvili, one of the conditions for advancing phase 2. When I asked about this, Trump said the U.S. believes it knows where Gvili's remains can be found in Gaza. Israeli officials say the statement came as a surprise, noting they do not know Gvili's exact location, only the general area he is believed to have fallen. Well, joining us for more on these issues from the U.S. is retired Army Colonel Rich Outson. He's now a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Rich, thank you for joining us. Now, you heard President Trump's comments, reaction to also strong comments from the Supreme Leader. Does this exchange bring us closer to potential a U.S. military action against the Iranian regime?
Well, it's good to be with you, Caleb. I don't think that the rhetoric in and of itself brings us closer. The military movements, the bringing in of additional naval assets, obviously create the possibility that we could strike. But I think that there's the narrative that goes on in public and the sort of brickbats thrown by each side at the other. There's a whole other level of communication going on between these two through back channels, through European nations. And I think it has to do with Iran's continuing crack down on its own dissidents and also its continuing threats to the region, our allies in the region, including Israel. So I think the red lines are there. It is the case. I mean, Trump's not wrong. It has been the case that in previous eras, the Iranian regime has threatened American presidents. I believe George Bush, for instance, was targeted with verbal threats, and that's not a smart thing for the Iranians to do. I also don't think there's a real intent to take out Khamenei on the part of the U.S. government. This is much more about what the state does, what its military arms do, and the threat that poses to U.S. interests. So that's all more theater, and it's below the public level where the real threats and the real chances for escalation or de-escalation are occurring.
All right, so you believe taking out Khamenei is not a goal, at least at this time, of the U.S. So give us a sense of what kind of action we would be looking at the U.S. Would be taking.
Well, if Trump passes the barrier of deciding that he wants to decisively intervene in the uprisings against the Iranian regime, he could hit a number of sites that are associated with the IRGC. That would be the Islamic Republic or Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, because this is a parallel military, as you know, in the Iranian system. They've got their sort of normal military, which is not as ideologically aligned, although obviously they'll defend the country if called upon to do so. IRGC is the regime's brute force. So if he wanted to go after communications nodes, leadership there, going after the arms and we've done this with Qasem Soleimani before, the sort of the leaders of the arms that are active in Iraq and Yemen and elsewhere, that's what I think he would do. He would cripple the military wing of sort of the most radical elements within the Iranian government. Khamenei himself, a very old guy, very symbolic guy, I don't think he's the key to whether they can continue to repress sort of the popular discontent that is bubbling up in this last couple of months.
Right. So attacking the IRGC facilities, for example, what kind of response? I mean, the regime has made clear attacking Ayatollah Khamenei would mean all-out war. What kind of response do you think can be expected if the U.S. should intervene and attack these IRGC facilities? We saw a more limited, almost symbolic response from Iran. They didn't want to escalate last year after the nuclear facilities were attacked. What about this round? How far do you think they would go?
Well, it's interesting. We're talking about a regional power that has really neglected in some ways its conventional military forces over the last 40 years. They really don't have much of an air force to speak of. They don't have large numbers of armored divisions or even infantry divisions that they could drop into a neighboring country, or a naval force that could attack the U.S. outside of some small ships and mines. What the Iranians are good at and what they most prefer to do is asymmetric warfare. And with that, some of it's in the cyber realm. Some of it would be assassinations and sabotage. I fully expect that with the open borders that we had under the Biden presidency in the United States, that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of Iranian sleeper agents across the United States who could engage in assassinations and sabotage against U.S. critical infrastructure. There's also possibility of floating mines and doing suicide attacks against naval forces. One of the reasons we pulled troops reportedly out of Qatar as things escalated a couple weeks ago is to limit the vulnerability. Obviously, when Iran attacked Israel, it did not have a sufficient number of long-range drones and surface-to-surface missiles to penetrate the air defenses of Israel, the United States, and our allies. But for those closer-in targets, like in Qatar, there's some soft spots that the U.S. could be hit at. So I suspect it would be asymmetric in that way. They'll call it total war, but in reality, Iran is not capable of waging total war. They could, however, inflict some of these asymmetric, painful blows, and I think Trump's trying to deter that.
Trying to deter that. Now, we do know, as we mentioned, that the carrier Abraham Lincoln is en route, should be here pretty much any day now. Does the U.S. have, at this time, or when will it have, sufficient forces to deter that kind of attack against these so-called soft targets? For example, in the region, maybe the Al Udeid base in Qatar. When will the U.S. be ready for that? Because reportedly, Prime Minister Netanyahu himself was concerned that those forces were not in place, for example, to sufficiently perhaps provide air defense for Israel like they did last year.
Right. Well, that's a good point, and I think it's become more complicated. This Middle East Air Defense Coalition that the U.S. had put together has become, over the last several months, a little bit more complicated. We still have the command and control for it, but the politics have gotten a little dicier, in my view, especially after the Israeli strike in Doha, Qatar, which really unnerved a number of the Arab allies who now are as worried, I think, about Iran falling apart as they are about the Iranian threat posed to Israel. So the politics have gotten worse. I think in the technical sense, their defense assets are sufficient right now because the capabilities that the Iranians can deploy are also much more limited after the fighting of the last 6 months of the year and so forth. So it's very interesting. And as to your question about deterrence, I think there's a significant enough or sufficient amount of military assets in the region now, at least after the carrier group comes in, to deter the sort of attacks on Qatar or even Israel. But Trump's doing something a little bit more difficult. He's trying to also deter the Iranian regime from slaughtering the dissidents who have risen up against it. So is that sufficient to do that? I'm a little bit less sanguine on that point, just because we've seen this movie before. We've seen the Iranian regime look like it was teetering and tottering on the edge, and the young generation of very thoughtful Iranians protesting and trying to get rid of this incredibly bad, oppressive regime. And then the street thugs come out. And even if it's not public executions, there's beatings, there's arrests. And I just don't know that we have enough military force to stop them from doing that. So I probably we're going to lose that level of the deterrence game. But I think we are in a position to deter from those other sorts of attacks that we saw earlier against Israel and also potentially against U.S. assets in the region.
Rich, I have to ask you, Steve Witkoff, speaking at a conference in Florida the other day, talked about the option, keeping the option alive of diplomacy with the Iranian regime. I could say that didn't go over so well, certainly among some quarters in Israel and certainly among some Iranians, both in Iran and abroad. Also, the fact that Witkoff did not mention deterring the Iranian attack, the Iranian regime's attacks on the protesters or the uprising as one of the goals of diplomacy. So I want to get your response to that. I mean, is the Trump administration really prepared? Do you think diplomacy is a real option with this regime? And do you think the Trump administration would insist on, as you say, protecting the people of Iran from the regime as one of the conditions of that diplomacy?
Well, Trump has his own unique brand of diplomacy, doesn't he? All right. So he does diplomacy by tweet. I think in the U.S. system, traditionally, especially during the Cold War, a little bit since, we've suffered under this illusion that the two are mutually exclusive options. You either use force or you engage in diplomacy. So it's fight, 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 or talk, talk, talk. The reality, and Israel, by the way, traditionally has done this very well, is fight, talk, fight, talk, fight, talk. It's not all just fight, 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 or talk, talk, talk. I think Trump is talking. He's talking through his tweets, and I agree with Witkoff on this, by the way. I think even as you inflict pretty serious pain economically and militarily on a target, you have to talk, because at the end of the day, it's not just punishment that is the goal. The goal is change, to change either something that they are doing, which is coercion, or to stop something that they think they are going to do, which is deterrence. Or I should have said it's compellence and deterrence. And I think Trump's actually a master at it. I think Witkoff, on behalf of Trump and Trump, are engaging in a form of diplomacy, and I think it's smart. At the end of the day, I'm not sure he wants to destroy Khamenei personally. I think he wants to constrain and change behavior of the regime. Remember that one of his key models when he's thinking about this is what we did with Iraq. After the first Gulf War, we had Iraq and Saddam Hussein under a set of sanctions. We had him in a box, so to speak, because he was constrained in the north by Operation Northern Watch, in the south by Southern Watch. And in Trump's view of the world, it was a massive mistake then to go in 2003 and incur all the costs of an actual regime change. I don't think he's after regime change. And if he's after regime compellence or regime deterrence, that can only be done if you're still talking. So yes, I actually think from a theoretical perspective, he's right to maintain it, both men, Trump and Witkoff. And I think he's doing it much more effectively than previous U.S. presidents have done.
All right. Well, as I said, there are skeptics that Khamenei, there's any real change likely to come to the Ayatollah Khamenei, but of course the views may differ on that. I want to move on to the situation in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu agreeing to join the Board of Peace, but he has come out this week and said there is disagreement with the Trump administration over the inclusion of Turkey and Qatar, at very least in the administration of Gaza, and certainly not in any inclusion of them putting boots on the ground in the Gaza Strip. I want to get your view on that. Is this an issue? How important is this as an issue dividing Israel and the Trump administration as phase 2 moves forward?
Well, as you know, I've served in both Turkey and in Israel, and I'm one of those few Americans who really wants the relationship between the two countries to be very strong and who wants the United States to be a good big brother, so to speak, to both countries. So I'm with Trump on this one. But I have to say, at this point, certainly any inclusion of Turkish troops in a military force in Gaza does not strike me as a wise or prudent move. Let's recognize that Turkey has a lot of assets to bring to bear diplomatically and economically in terms of construction companies and things like that. It can play an important and a positive role in the reconstruction of Gaza once the negotiations and a new post-Hamas governance structure is put into place. But look, Turkish troops on the ground in Gaza, even if they would be accepted by the locals, would be incendiary in the regional context. And frankly, there's just a lot of things that could go wrong with that. Even if the Jerusalem and Ankara both had a fairly good will going into that. So I think the U.S. is pragmatic on this. Trump obviously has a good relationship with Turkish President Erdogan, and he has insisted that he not be excluded from this process. Including him and the Qataris on the peace board strikes me as a good compromise position. And again, if it were me, I think the compromise that you give back to Netanyahu in exchange for that is, look, no Turkish boots on the ground, maybe construction companies, and they'll be part of the diplomatic negotiations, and you guys really ought to talk, which Trump has told Netanyahu on multiple occasions. But I think it's probably appropriate that Netanyahu's got a red line on Turkish military presence in Gaza, and I just don't think that would be constructive. In short, I think there is a room for a win-win, and the Venn diagrams overlap enough, if you will, that with Trump continuing and Witkoff continuing to shepherd this, I think we can get to a workable structure.
Well, Rich, I'll just give you one caveat I'm hearing from Israeli analysts here in the last few days, which is concern over phase 2 developing what they call the Hezbollah or Lebanon model in Gaza, which is Hamas does a sort of symbolic return or of decommissioning of some of its weapons, and then basically using this new administration being set up as sort of cover to maintain their presence in the Gaza Strip, the way that Hezbollah has used the Lebanese government, if you can call it that, to basically maintain its activities in Lebanon.
That they're absolutely right. That model with Hezbollah withdrawing the public face of its governance, but controlling the sort of subterranean structures and having outsized influence in terms of military forces, intelligence, and so forth. That cannot be the way that Gaza operates. It's too sensitive, too close to the Israeli heartland. Ironically, the best solution for this is one that the Netanyahu government has consistently been against, which is to bring in an alternative Palestinian ruling structure. We've got that. It's called the Palestinian Authority. It's imperfect. There are obviously administrative weaknesses. There's corruption. There's all sorts of things. But look, I've worked with those folks. They want to live in peace with Israel. And would it be an easy thing to root out all the Hezbollah sympathetic people there? But no, but the political economy is not that hard. You flow resources and authorities under the new ruling structure through people who have worked in the Palestinian Authority and technocrats who are not Fatah people, but that are willing to work with them, that are known to the U.S. And by the way, tons of these people are known to the Israeli security services. There's a political objection to them, but on the security sense, Mossad and Shin Bet know who these people are. So it's not hard to get a set of sort of administrators and security folks. And as long as you've got sort of the external support to make sure Hezbollah doesn't throw them off, that Hamas doesn't throw them off of buildings like happened in 2006, that's a workable structure. But I think there's going to have to be a political decision made that, look, it's not in Jerusalem, it's not going to be external Arabs who come and fix this. At the end of the day, if you want to replace Hamas rule and avoid the Hezbollah paradigm that you're talking about, there's got to be some non-Hamas Palestinians that are put in charge. And they exist, and you know who they are, so let's empower them.
Yeah, one of them seems to have already been appointed to this administrative board over Gaza, Ali Shat, who had been a deputy minister in the PA. So that may be coming, but as you said, very politically difficult for Prime Minister Netanyahu. I'll just note, we do expect potentially some kind of signing ceremony at the Davos Economic Conference tomorrow, but who knows if those things... President Trump has to get there first on a plane that can make it all the way across the Atlantic. Colonel Rich Utzin, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you.
with another diplomatic news. The UN Security Council Secretary, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling on Israel to halt the demolition of the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency's compound in East Jerusalem and to restore it and other UNRWA premises to the UN without delay. Now, Israeli authorities demolished structures inside the compound on Tuesday, this a year after seizing the site. Surrounded by Israeli forces, bulldozers razed several large buildings where dozens of UNRWA staff once worked. Now, this move follows years of escalating Israeli action against UNRWA, which Israel accuses of having deep ties to Hamas and of perpetuating the conflict by maintaining Palestinian refugee status across generations. Now, in October 2024, the Knesset passed legislation banning UNRWA from operating on Israeli territory, citing security concerns and evidence linking agency employees to terror activities. Despite those laws, some UNRWA operations in East Jerusalem had continued in a limited capacity. Israeli officials say the HQ itself had already been vacated and no longer qualified as a protected UN site and thus open to demolition. Well, UN officials have condemned the move as a violation of international law, but Israel's Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, has called the move historic.
The Secretary General views as wholly unacceptable the continued escalatory actions against UNRWA, which are inconsistent with Israel's clear obligations under international law, including under the Charter of the United Nations and the Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations. The Secretary General urges the government of Israel to immediately cease the demolition of the UNRWA Sheikh Jarrah compound and to return and restore the compound and other UNRWA premises to the United Nations without delay.
יום היסטורי, זה יום חג, וזה יום חשוב מאוד למשילות בירושלים. במשך שנים התומכי טרור האלה היו כאן. והיום תומכי הטרור האלה מסולקים מכאן עם כל מה שהם בנו כאן. לכל מי שתומך טרור בירושלים.
In another news, Israel's High Court of Justice has ruled that autopsies will not be performed on the two infants who died at an unlicensed, overcrowded daycare center in Jerusalem. This as violent ultra-Orthodox riots erupted across the country in protest. Now, the court overturned a lower court decision that had approved postmortems, ruling that invasive autopsies are unnecessary if other medical tests could confirm the cause of death. The decision allowed 3-month-old Leah Golovenchich and 6-month-old Aaron Katz to be buried without further delay. Now, the families, who are part of the ultra-Orthodox community, oppose autopsies on religious grounds. A strict interpretation of Jewish law generally prohibits autopsies, viewing the human body as sacred and calling for quick burial unless the procedure can clearly save another life. Now, police believe that these infants died from heat exhaustion and dehydration, possibly due to a malfunctioning heating system in a sealed room. Meanwhile, 2 caregivers from the daycare remain in custody, with police investigating possible reckless homicide and criminal negligence in one of the most shocking child care tragedies here in recent years. Well, joining us for more is Tzipi Yarom, a journalist who is from and writes about the Haredi community. Tzipi, thank you for joining us. And of course, a terrible tragedy in and of itself. But this is major national news because it just increases the tensions there are between the ultra-Orthodox community and I guess the rest of Israel against the backdrop of the Haredi draft issue. But first, I have to just ask you, what I'm hearing, unfairly or not, from a lot of people is just not understanding how the Haredi community went out and protest against autopsies of these 2 children and not against the circumstances that led to their death of this at least 30 infants in this overcrowded, unlicensed, dangerous daycare center. So maybe just try to explain that reaction to us.
So I think the point where we have to start with is, how did we come to this place? And this is, say I'm a mother who is just getting out of maternity leave and I have to go back to work out of home. And I need a place to put my baby in. There aren't enough places, enough sufficient places that are supervised by the state. I'm telling you this from personal experience. And then people are just looking for a place to put their baby in. The mother wants to work. She's looking for a place. There's no such a place. Maybe sometimes they'll find a private babysitter who'll do that. This is what I did more than once, but not always. And then there are those private daycares who are there for many years. They're babysitters or teachers are known to be good for the kids. People are sending them because they were happy with how the kids felt there. And then they expanded. What we see in this case is not just one daycare place. It's actually three together, three combined. And people sent there, and they were happy with what happened there. And then this tragedy comes, and we ask, what happened there? So first of all, the sense is that they weren't aware enough of the safety of how do you conduct heat in such a cold day. It was a very cold day in Jerusalem yesterday, actually the coldest day since the beginning of the winter. And the babysitter probably just wanted to heat the place and to make it just better for the baby who was for the first day there. So what they did was wrong because they didn't let enough air inside, and it was too hot. It's just dangerous to leave kids like that. But they weren't thinking of what they are doing, and this is where we come to the autopsy, because there is not a single person who thinks that something was done there on purpose, like they were throwing the baby or maybe hitting them or something like that.
Nobody is making that accusation, even among the police.
So the point is that the coroner could examine them from the outside, or maybe take draw blood and check what's the situation with the body without cutting into it and then finding some more information. So the feeling is that those babysitters are going to jail. We're all certain about that. They have enough evidence to do that anyway. So why bother their body after death when we are so against it? And it's not like, if we think that somebody killed someone, and sometimes that's the only way to find out, sometimes they will let you do that because you have to prevent the next homicide or the next murder. In order to check it, you'll have to perform an autopsy. This is not the case. So anyway, this is why people went out. They are not supporting the fact that babies died. Everybody sees it as the tragedy, and surprisingly, that there are parents who said if they are reopening this daycare tomorrow, we are sending our kids there again. We just think it was a very bad tragedy and not something that we should blame the babysitter for. A parent said that.
The parents said that. We only have a few seconds, but the fact is this was unlicensed, and people are saying this is indicative of an attitude that we don't need the government to tell us what to do, in this case with tragic circumstances.
Yes, but it's also because of the necessity. You don't have enough licensed places, so people will send to places that are unlicensed.
Even if you have it's a 32 women watching over 30 children, which seems to have been
more than
the case
that.
Here.
They didn't report about it, but I checked. There are more women than what they reported about. Still, there are a lot of babies there. And I personally never would send to such a place, but I understand people who do that. They say, we need a place. We checked about the babysitter. She's taking good care of the baby. So what can we do? This is what we're saying. And we're sending our kids there.
Well, unfortunately, it's a tragedy, which I hope doesn't reoccur. Tzipi Yarom, thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
And that wraps this edition of ILTV On the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel. I'm Caleb Ben David, and thank you for joining us.
אני כל הרגל שלי פצועה, כל הרגל שלי יש לי חירורים, אבא כל הרגליים שלו, קרמל גם. אמא, לא, את אמא עומדת למות, אני אומרת לכם.
Do you want to know how hell looks like on earth? Welcome to Kibbutz Be'eri. 2 years ago exactly, on the 7th of October, the Bachar family was on hell. A 3 meter on a 3 meter hell. Come with me and find out this unbelievable story of the Bachar family.
We were in the safe room. We were 4 persons in the safe room. It's me, Dana. I have 4 children. My old son, Rotem, he was in India in the same Nofar. The second is 19 years old. He's in the army.
And then you have Carmel and Hadar. And they were in the house with you and Dana.
6:30, the kibbutz with a lot of people. You know why? Because on October 6th, we just celebrate our birthday, the kibbutz birthday. It's been like 70 years. We are like 1,100 people, but in the same day, we were like 1,400. This is the master bedroom. We were here, and we start hearing the shooting. It's not the shooting, it's the thunder, like the missiles goes above us.
That whistle of the missile?
Yeah, a lot of them. So me and Dana here, and we are hear the rockets, and we know something happened. And
It's usual, right?
Yeah, it's usual. But in usual, there are 2 helicopters up, 1 drone, and after 5 minutes, a few missiles to Gaza, and that's it, it's done. This is the usual. But in the same day, it's not like that.
If I tell you in the world that the usual thing is that you hear rockets flying all over your head and then lands in your backyard, you can't say it's usual. This is missiles, rockets, literally sent from Gaza to Israel, to Kibbutz Be'eri. But the people here in Israel has gotten used to it. I promise you, you have no idea what we're talking about. So year after year, year after year after year, Hamas, the terrorist organization who ruled Gaza, kept sending missiles, launching missiles to Israel.
And I told Dana, okay, there is something wrong. And I told her, okay, let's go downstairs to see where's the children, and because our safe room is in the downstairs. This is Adar rooms, and we met right here. And this room, it's Carmel's room.
Carmel's room. Hadar, Carmel is here.
When we start to speak to them and say, okay, look what's going on, because all the rockets, and we start laughing on ourselves because we thought there was a rocket and, you know, like a zikukim, and came to Gaza to celebrate our birthday,
Fireworks.
and the fireworks, and we are and we're going out because we want to see the rockets. And we look up to the border, that's the border over there. So you can see all the rockets goes above all of.
That's Gaza over here. Just 4-kilometer walk. You know, if you can walk fast, it's 6 minutes per kilometer. Then you'd find yourself here within 24 minutes in Gaza just walking. That's how it's close to Kibbutz Be'eri.
And around 10 minutes to 7, you start hear the shooting in the middle of the kibbutz. And they came in and they start shooting all over. They running through our place and where we live, and they start shooting everyone. And the chat start talking about everything. Also, they shoot these people, they burn this house, they kill this one, and everything in the chat.
Wow.
And,
So while you're standing here, you're looking at the WhatsApp group and you're literally seeing them just saying, this was killed, this was killed, this was killed, this was killed.
Absolutely.
In the WhatsApp group, you're getting a message, go to the safe room.
Yeah, go to the safe room because there's a terrorist in the kibbutz. Okay. You have to go to the safe room.
And that was 7:10.
We got into the house, we shield the house, and we locked the door. I told Dana and Carmel and Adar, okay, let's go to the safe room. And Carmel told me, wait, Dad. He went to the kitchen. He brought a few hardcore steel knife. He played with them like that. And he told me, Dad, don't worry. We're gonna fight with them.
What's a safe room? A safe room, it is a bomb shelter. So in terms of when rockets are being launched from Gaza to here, you go to this safe room, and plus minus you are protected, even if a rocket falls very near the building that you are in, but only in a safe room. And that's why the Israelis on the 7th of October immediately ran to the bomb shelter, but then you told me that the bomb shelter became a trap.
A bomb shelter, you have to fight on the hand door because you can't lock the bomb shelters. Because if somebody wants to help you, you just open the door.
The door?
We're waiting, yeah.
So you closed the door and you waited here? Was this window
we closed
shut?
Everything
Closed?
Yes, we closed the two.
Everything
there's
closed?
Two panels. There's two panels. We closed the two. There's the stock.
Yeah, of course it was shut because of that. But
so we closed everything. We also closed the glass.
So everything was closed?
Yes. Adar, she's sitting here, really close to the wall. And Dana, she's over there.
So Dana's here, Hadar is here.
You are. Help me. It's around 8:30 in the morning, we hear the bell ringing. I'm standing right here, you know, like you're in stress, like you're holding like that, and Carmel helped me, and you hear the steps on the floor. You know that the terrorists, they're not coming to looking for us in the second floor. They come straight to the safe room. Because of course they knew.
They knew.
They knew because they killed the people up. That means the other in the neighborhood.
And they were in the safe room.
They knew that all the people in the kibbutz, they are in the safe room.
Targeting intentionally civilians, knowing that they are going to be in the safe room. This is a war crime.
And the terrorists, they came, they start, you know, like a hand fight, exactly the same. Yeah, they try to open, and absolutely. They try to open and we close, they try to open and we close, and suddenly one of the terrorists told me, Iftach al-bab, open the door. And told me, go away, Ruh,
Ruh, go away.
Yeah. And he told me again, open the door. And I even say the second go, a shot through the door. We're holding the handle like that. And Carmel, my son, he's standing here.
And is he pushing the hand out?
About me, he pushed me. So this one, it's Carmel blood from his arm, because this bullet took his arm, both arms. Carmel, you know, is with Arabic, so he cursed in Arabic. And he told me, he said, oh no, there's no Sri Lanka, because it's supposed to be in December in Sri Lanka. He was a surfer.
Oh my God,
the only thing,
yeah,
the only thing he thought about, it's about the sea, his surfboard.
He's a surfer.
Yeah, he was a surfer. He was a great surfer.
That shot you in the arm and in your legs.
In my legs.
And you keep going.
I keep standing on that. The right leg is died. There's nothing left in the right leg. The left one, you feel something happened to her. You don't know exactly what happened.
Like it's
like
burning.
It's like, you know, when you go to the gym, you feel your muscle a bit strong. That's how you feel.
Yeah.
So, exactly. Yeah. And I saw, because I'm really recognized like that, I look to the floor, and I saw a few tears of blood on the floor, and I talked to myself. I said that, but I'm all right. And I saw that this bullet took my arm, and the blood go from my arms. So a few seconds later, I collapsed and fell into
What time that was?
9:30. 30 minutes later, there are heavy smoke getting.
Around 10 o'clock?
It's around 10 o'clock. It's a heavy smoke.
Where the heavy smoke is coming from?
They brought everything. In the Be'eri, it was a system. First of all, they shot. Second, they burn. And later, when you jump out from the window, they kill you outside in the backyard. It's a system. There's 150 houses like that, or more than that.
אני לא יודעת איפה היא נפצעה, אבל היא היחידה שכמעט מאבדת את הכרה, היא וכרמל. אני והבעוד קצת בסדר, אני הכי בסדר.
Hamas terrorists, the Nukhba unit, which is the elite unit of Hamas, they came first, they did what they did, they left to another house. So now you're telling me that the civilians...
Yes, they gave the mission to other people, burn them.
And they're not like part of the Nukhba, they're literally Gazans.
I don't know who are they, but maybe it's not the Nukhba, because the Nukhba, they got the weapon and they go to kill the other people. But they know that, okay, if there's a heavy smoke in the safe room, you have to jump out from the window. And the Nukhba, they're waiting for you here, why they're not waiting here.
Gotcha.
And when you jump out, they kill you there.
So that massacre on the 7th of October, not only official Hamas members, terrorists, took part of it, but also civilians took part in the massacre. And there's countless evidence to that, by the way, which you can see all over the social media of civilians, Gazans, who came to the settlements here in southern of Israel and literally took part of the massacre. They start burning, smoke is coming in.
Smoke coming in, a lot of smoke, a heavy smoke. Everything is closed. We open just the glass window, that's it. We open that one and you can't breathe. And when you can't breathe anymore, I told them, okay, you have to take the pots of Bechar with the pee and the towel, and with the blood, it's become like a glue.
Yeah.
And we put it on the face. You can breathe through it. It's easier, but it's not good for a long time.
So wait, you breathe pee and blood?
Of course. You want to survive, you have to.
What happened after that?
The terrorists, they decide to open the window because they saw that we didn't jump out. They decide to open the window. They put a big bombs on the window. If you go for the other side, you can see it. And they explode this fucking window.
זרקו עלינו רימון, ברגל יש לי חור, אני מנסה להחזיק את זה, יש לי ברגל 5 חורים. זרקו עלינו רימונים, ירו בנו.
When they explode this one, the right one stuck in a frame is not moved. But the second one moved like 10 centimeters to the side.
So there was like a gap?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a gap. So for us, it was good. Because
smoke
all
is getting out.
Absolutely. The hair comes from the door, and the smoke get in, go up, and go down. That's how it's going. So I'm looking around, so we are still alive. We are all right. But that's the good things. The worst things, we got 3 grenades inside. And when they throw the grenade hit the wall here and fell into the drawer.
That's the first explosion here, you can see it. That's the second explosion. And what about the third grenade? It didn't explode. So you had with you a grenade, live grenade, that did not explode.
Yes. You feel like your ears in the plastic bags. That's how you feel. I'm looking around, so we are still alive. So all the shrapnels, you can see all over, all the shrapnels go up, most of them. And the terrorists, they took like a metal stick, like a magnet stick, they put on the grenade, and they wrapped the grenade with metal balls, screws, and needles.
By the way, this is another act of a war crime, yeah?
And Ada, she told me, at the same time, that's not a real grenade. I tell you, why you say that? Because she's 13. And she told me because I got a lot of screws in my legs. And now we are bleeding, we are 3 bleeding in the safe room. Dana, until now, she's all right. And I'm, bleeding from my legs and in Carmel, but it's all right. But we were on the floor. We hear 2 shots, and Dana told me, I can't breathe. Adar, she tried to clean her a little bit. She told Adar, it's done. And she told us, I don't have nothing for nobody in this world, and she died.
Avidai, you knew that your wife died.
Yes.
And you are without legs, with a bullet also in your arm, with a kid who is injured in his arm, they're trying to keep him alive. And you have a daughter that was also hit from shrapnels. And at this time, you realize that you lost your wife as well. Yet you still have the power to tell your daughter,
Mom, she's all right. She's not suffering anymore. She died. We have to keep him alive. Around 4:30, Carmel, he knew that go out for the safe room. He knew that. Around 5 o'clock afternoon, Carmel, he got his short breath and he died.
כרמל, תישאר איתנו. אל תעצום עיניים. אמא, לא תישאר איתנו.
Before he died, he told me, Dad, don't forget, so burying me with the surfboard. And Adar, she saw me, and she told me, Dad, don't leave me alone. Because she saw me, I'm almost gonna die here. And she called 911 again. My dad almost gonna die, what I supposed to do. And the 911, they record everything.
בסדר. איפה היריות? הן מתחילות מהאגן עצמו או מהרגליים למטה?
Around 7:30, 7:15, the commander of Yalom, he came to this window. He took his flashlight, looked into the safe room, and told the other guy, there is a massacre here in the safe room. So if you want to live next to them, you can't. I think we gave them any money, any opportunities. They don't want to kill us. I think they want to live like us, but they don't. They don't want to live like us. They don't want me here. They want to take my land. It's not about something about religious. It's nothing. It's about territory and land. That's it.
You were in hell. There's no other definition to what you went through on the 7th of October. There's a lot of people around the world that either they deny what happened here, and clearly we can see the evidence is countless. Yeah? And of course your story as a first eyewitness that went through hell. What do you have to say to the world for those who are right now supporting the terrorist organization Hamas, literally advocating and echoing the narrative of Hamas?
We have to know that the Islamic here next to us, it's really want to kill us because our land. We can see the Palestinian here, and if you move to Europe, I'm sure it's going to be there also. And we have to keep on ourselves, and for the Jewish nation, I think we have to be in Israel. This is the only state that we got, and we have to keep on it for many generations forward.
That for them, there is no such thing as, let's have a dialogue. They don't think about, maybe let's hear the other side. There's no freedom of speech. There's also no freedom of religion. That's a different topic. But the bottom line is, you do not have dialogue with them because they don't believe in dialogue. They have their own way. You're either with them or against them. If you're with them, your life might be saved, But if you're against it, for sure, you're dead.
Imagine earning your master's degree on top of Mount Carmel, where forest meets sea and where every day brings a new cultural, academic, and personal adventure. This is the multi-experience at Haifa International. Here, students from around the world live and learn together in Israel's most culturally diverse city, meeting new people, discovering new perspectives, and shaping their own Israel experience.
There's people from different countries, from different religions and different languages. Somehow we are all very similar.
At Haifa, academics meet real life. You don't just study, you experience Israel up close, explore Haifa's mountain ocean city life, and build global friendships that last a lifetime.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience. It opens your mind, your network, and your world.
Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. airing on 11 international TV channels, and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel, reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect, thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Caleb Ben David, coming to you live from Israel, breaking down all of the biggest headlines coming out of the region. Here are the latest developments. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued one of his toughest warnings yet to Iran, saying that if the Islamic Republic attempts to assassinate him, the U.S. would respond so forcefully that Iran would be wiped off the face of this earth.
They shouldn't be doing it, but I've left notification. Anything ever happens, we're going to blow the whole country is going to get blown up. So we've, originally Biden should have said something. When they made a statement, we always said, why isn't Biden saying anything? Because he didn't. But a president has to defend a president. Like if I were here and they were making that threat to somebody, not even a president, but somebody, like they did with me, I would absolutely hit them so hard. But I have very firm instructions. Anything happens, they're going to wipe them off the face of this earth.
Now, Trump's comments follow recent reports that Iran has warned the president against any action to be taken against the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, calling such steps a cause for total war. While Trump said strong military options remain available, he has not ordered a strike, and it remains unclear how far Washington is willing to go if Iran's regime continues to threaten American leaders or interests and massacre its own people opposing the Ayatollah's rule. Meanwhile, the U.S. continues its buildup of military forces in the region, with the carrier USS Abraham Lincoln expected to arrive later this week in Mideast waters. And turning now to Gaza, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted U.S. President Trump's invitation to join the newly formed Board of Peace, this according to a statement from the Prime Minister's office. The initiative, led and chaired for life by President Trump, is aimed at resolving global conflicts with an initial focus on the Gaza Strip. Israel now joins Argentina, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Hungary, Kazakhstan, Morocco, the United Arab Emirates, Kosovo, and Vietnam in accepting the invitation. Sweden, Norway, and France have rejected joining, while other nations are weighing the offer, some reportedly concerned over an invitation extended to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Board of Peace is supposed to oversee the executive board administering Gaza, which includes officials from Turkey and Qatar, despite Israel's objections to their inclusion. Diplomats have warned that the new Board of Peace could undermine the role of the UN, but supporters say it could offer a new path for resolving international conflicts. Trump also has denounced the role as the UN as unhelpful. Meanwhile, President Trump is pushing to move ahead with Phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire, as senior Israeli officials say the current stalemate is helping Hamas, not Israel. According to senior Israeli officials, moving to Phase 2 serves Israel's interests regardless of the hostage issue, but they warn that the current pause allows Hamas to receive aid and funding, rebuild military capabilities, and deepen its control over Gaza's population. These officials say Phase 2 should require Hamas to disarm and dismantle its military infrastructure, a demand they believe Hamas is unlikely to accept. Hamas would be given a deadline after which Israel could return to military action. Now, Israel's High Court of Justice has ruled that autopsies will not be performed on the 2 infants who died at an unlicensed, overcrowded daycare in Jerusalem. This after violent ultra-Orthodox riots erupted in protest, highlighting the growing social divide between Israel's Haredi sector and the rest of the country. Now, the court overturned a lower court decision that had approved postmortems, ruling that invasive autopsies are unnecessary if other medical tests can confirm the cause of death. The decision allowed 3-month-old Leah Golovenchich and 6-month-old Aaron Katz to be buried without further delay. The families who are ultra-Orthodox opposed autopsies on religious grounds. The strict interpretation of Jewish law generally prohibits autopsies, viewing the human body as sacred and calling for quick burial. unless the procedure can clearly save another life. Police believe the infants died from heat exhaustion and dehydration, possibly due to a malfunctioning heating system in a sealed room. Meanwhile, two caregivers from the daycare remain in custody, with police investigating possible reckless homicide and criminal negligence. The case and the violent protest it sparked has added to the social tensions generated by the public debate over the military deferments that are granted to the ultra-Orthodox sector and the efforts to find a legislative solution. Well, and that ends our update coming to you on the hour. Stay tuned for more updates, or of course you can go to our app. You see the QR code on your screen. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV. Thank you for joining us here on Caravan.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Emily Schrader, and coming up in today's newscast, tensions with Iran escalate as USS Lincoln approaches striking distance of Iran. Israel objects to invitation of Qatar and Turkey to the Board of Peace in Gaza. Israel reports a major decline in terror attacks in Judea and Samaria thanks to IDF crackdown. As U.S. President Donald Trump heads to the World Economic Forum in Davos, the Iranian people are still awaiting the help the American leader promised was on the way. Potential help is coming as the USS Lincoln is moving closer to striking distance of Iran in the Arabian Sea. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
President Trump will be attending the World Economic Forum in Davos and is expected to be there tomorrow and Thursday for high-profile events with a number of world issues, perhaps topped by Greenland, on his agenda. Trump has not commented or posted about Iran since Saturday, but that does not mean that the issue is off Trump's radar. The USS Abraham Lincoln has been spotted entering the Malacca Strait between Malaysia and Indonesia. The ship was stationed in the South China Sea only days ago, and it's traveled more than half of the 10-day journey to get within striking distance of Iran in the Arabian Sea. President Trump would then have all military options available to attack Iran if he chooses to strike after the deadly massacre of thousands of regime opponents. One world leader is now openly saying that Iran's leadership may be entering its final days. That's the word from German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who became the first major world leader to predict the early fall of the Ayatollah's regime. Merz said a government that can only hold power through violence is, quote, effectively finished. He added that Germany is in close contact with the United States and European allies, demanding that Tehran halt its deadly crackdown on protesters.
Mich besorgen im Augenblick die Nachrichten über eine immer höhere Gewaltbereitschaft der Polizei, der sogenannten Revolutionsgarden in Iran gegen die eigene Bevölkerung. Ich will die Gelegenheit nutzen, noch einmal das Mullah-Regime aufzufordern, diese Gewalt sofort einzustellen. Wenn sich ein Regime nur noch mit Gewalt an der Macht halten kann, dann ist es faktisch am Ende. Ich gehe davon aus, dass wir jetzt hier auch gerade die letzten Tage und Wochen dieses Regimes sehen.
President Trump has warned Iran and earlier suggested possible intervention to counter Tehran's crackdown on protesters, but has recently stepped back from immediate strikes as diplomatic and domestic pressures mount. The Pentagon has presented strike options targeting Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile infrastructure, but no final decision has been made. U.S. naval and air assets are still moving toward the Middle East, signaling heightened readiness. Tehran denounced U.S. threats, warning any attack will be met with firm and decisive response. There is no confirmed strike order, but Washington continues evaluating options amid sharp rhetoric. The situation remains fluid, with both escalation and diplomatic paths possible, and Jerusalem is watching closely.
And now phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire is now taking shape with new international players. President Trump is moving ahead with his proposed Board of Peace, despite objections from Israel and mixed reactions from world leaders. ILTV's India Naftali is with us and has the latest. India?
Absolutely, Emily. As phase 2 of the ceasefire draws closer, the diplomatic battle over who will shape Gaza's future is intensifying. Israel demands that Hamas be fully disarmed. Meanwhile, the U.S. is moving quickly to set up an international body intended to oversee Gaza during the post-war transition. The White House says a signing ceremony for President Trump's proposed Board of Peace will be held this Thursday in Davos, Switzerland, while world leaders are gathered there for the World Economic Forum. World leaders have been called on to sign the board's charter, formally launching the Board of Peace that is expected to oversee Gaza's reconstruction and the disarmament of Hamas. President Isaac Herzog is expected to attend. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will not, though he confirmed he was invited to join the board. In Israel, the plan is already sparking tension. Reports say that Netanyahu personally called U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio to express strong opposition to the inclusion of Turkey and Qatar on the Gaza Executive Board. Israeli officials say both countries maintain close ties to Hamas and that their participation came as a surprise to Israel. Sources say Netanyahu acknowledges the decision is unlikely to be reversed, but made clear Israel's position. Speaking in the Knesset, the Prime Minister reiterated what he calls Israel's non-negotiable condition for Phase 2. Hamas must be fully disarmed and Gaza completely demilitarized. Netanyahu said Israel would prefer to achieve this through diplomacy, but warned military force remains an option. Meanwhile, Egypt is moving ahead with the civilian side of the plan. This week, Egypt's foreign minister met with Ali Shah, who is the head of the newly formed Palestinian Technocratic Committee that is expected to administer Gaza under the U.S.-backed framework. The committee will include 15 members and operate under the supervision of the Board of Peace during a transitional period. Inside Israel's government, however, there is open opposition. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has called for the U.S.-led Civil-Military Coordination Center in Israel to be shut down and has demanded Hamas be given a short ultimatum to disarm or face full-scale military assault. And abroad, the UK has indicated it is ready to take part in Phase 2.
Look, we're supportive of the measures that are being taken across the Middle East, particularly the ceasefire. I do think we need to press on to Phase 2. We've indicated our willingness to play our part.
More countries have also confirmed receiving invitations to join the board, including Morocco and Poland. Pakistan says it was invited as well, despite having no diplomatic relations with Israel. France, however, has reportedly rejected the offer, citing concerns the body could undermine the United Nations. As a result, President Trump is threatening to impose 200% tariffs on French wine and champagne. And finally, according to multiple reports, President Trump has even invited Russian President Vladimir Putin to the Board of Peace, a move that has raised additional questions about the board's direction. There are a lot of moving parts here at play, and with the Board of Peace signing just days away, the next phase of the ceasefire is moving from the battlefield into the diplomatic arena, where Israel, the United States, and dozens of global powers are now discussing what Gaza's post-war governance will look like. Emily?
All right, thank you, India, for that update. Well, joining us now to discuss Gaza Phase 2, as well as the state of play with Iran, is our panel for today. Colonel Miri Eisen, a senior fellow at the Institute of Counterterrorism, and Asher Friedman, the executive director of the Misgav Institute for National Security. Welcome to both of you to the show. Asher, I'd like to start with you. What are your thoughts on the U.S. pushing forward into Phase 2 in Gaza, as well as inviting Turkey and Qatar to this Board of Peace?
Well, thank you, Emily. We have to recall that the very first point in President Trump's 20-point plan is that Gaza will be a de-radicalized, terror-free zone. Now, there are absolutely people on the Board of Peace, on the Executive Committee, who are people who I know personally, who are truly dedicated to Israel's security, to lasting peace between Israel and Gaza. But the devil, especially dealing with Hamas, is certainly in the details, and how all these various international bodies and boards and committees are going to actually lead to Hamas being disarmed, I think very much remains to be seen.
Colonel Eisen, I want to ask you realistically, I mean, what are Israel's options in terms of Phase 2 in Gaza? And how can the risk posed by potential members of this board, such as Turkey and Qatar, can that risk be mitigated by Israel in any way?
Emily, we already accepted Phase 2 when it was signed or presented by President Trump. And I want to remind everybody, what we as if paid is because we got back on October 13th, 2025, 20 live Israeli hostages. And I put that out there because it has to be connected one to the other. For that, and that's the 20 live and the bulk of the dead, and we still have Ran Gvili, who has not been given back, we had to compromise. We did not know the details of the compromise is, and as Asher said very clearly, the devil is now in the details. You cannot go in and out of the area which is controlled still by Hamas except through Israel. The map that President Trump put together and posted is the map that goes hand in hand with this board of peace. It includes different lines, that yellow line, and then there's a red line. Israel and the Israeli troops are still sitting in and around the Gaza Strip. You can't go in by air, you can't go in by sea, you certainly cannot go in by land. So how does it actually happen that in this board you have all of these countries that Israel won't allow them in because they have to go through us? This has to be coordinated. I truly think, and this is my opinion, I have not sat in the room, not with the Prime Minister, not with President Trump, that the devil in the details has actually, yes, been brought to the table, meaning there's a lot of rhetoric that goes on in Israel right now against what's happening, but I do think that these different aspects were brought up before. I am not surprised that Turkey and Qatar are inside, because at the end, the United States has interests that are not only the security of Israel. I do believe that they strongly believe in that, but that they're also going to bring additional hard-to-swallow elements into the room.
All right, well, I do want to move to discuss a bit more about Iran. Colonel Eisen, let me ask you first. We see U.S. assets being moved to the Middle East, more of them on the way now. Threats from President Trump very much still on the table. Do you think the U.S. will ultimately take action, and what will the objective be for such an operation?
So I'm going to separate that into two, Emily. I'm never willing to give a prediction on what President Trump will or will not do. And that means that they may attack and they may not attack. But I will try and address what would you attack if you attack, because I really don't know to say if they will or not. You need to, at this stage along the way, the threats that have come out very clearly, it has to be against the different regime projects, and that's both the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which Israel attacked quite heavily in June of last year. I remind everybody we had absolute air superiority. You have to, when you attack something like that, you have to take into account what the Iranians will do. So I expect them to go against Iranian Revolutionary Guard targets, the air defense, and perhaps some of the missiles that I think that Iran would try to fire against us. But more than that, and Israel did not really do this in June of 2025, neither did the United States, is to go against the symbols that we're seeing right now. It could be against the supreme leader. It could be against not just the symbols themselves, but the different structures in which you house this Islamic regime, the one that makes the decisions that have been so horrific for the Iranian people, Persian-speaking people, over I'm going to say the last 40 years or 45 years, and certainly over the last few years, where they have no economy, no electricity, no water, and they have no future, and they're under sanctions. And I think that those different aspects would be attacked by the United States if they choose to do so.
Now, Asher, the New York Times cited a U.S. official who claimed that the strike was delayed because Israel asked the president to delay. There's also been a lot of rumors floating around that Israel perhaps was militarily unprepared to deal with the backlash of an extended fight with the Islamic Republic. Is there any truth in this, in what you're hearing?
Well, I find it hard to believe. First of all, because Prime Minister Netanyahu has defined defeating Iran as one of the primary goals of his historic legacy. Secondly, as Colonel Eisen correctly pointed out, we had achieved near total air superiority over Iran, and Iran has not yet been able to rebuild those air defenses, the sophisticated air defenses that it once had. So Israel could still more or less control the airspace. Now the question is, have we fully refilled the arsenal, the batteries of anti-missile missiles? That's a question that remains, but it's very hard for me to believe that Israel would have dissuaded President Trump for that reason. It's possible that Israel communicated a message that we should let the protests play themselves out and a strike might be counterproductive. I think you could have an argument about that. We have to recall that two very significant things. One is that for the first time, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have explicitly declared regime change as the goal. And because, as Colonel Eisen pointed out, the economic drivers of which were the base of the protests, the declining real, the skyrocketing prices for food, the water shortages, this isn't over. At very best, the regime may have temporarily suppressed the protests. We're going to see again and again and again protests. And I do hope that President Trump, together with its allies, will take action.
Now, I do want to ask both of you before we do have to wrap up. We'll start with you, Colonel Eisen. How likely do you think the fall of the Islamic Republic is at this point, based on what we're seeing in the streets right now?
I think that when we're looking at Iran of 2026, we're already hearing voices. I'm not going to say post-regime, but I do have an expectation that it cannot continue the way it is now. Now, a regime fall does not mean, and here comes the liberal democracy. But I do think that there's going to be a change in 2026. By the way, that could be a change for the worse for the Iranian people. It can be worse than it is now. It can be a hardcore Iranian Revolutionary Guard dictatorship, very harsh reality, which is not exactly what exists there right now with all of the horrible things going on. So I do expect a change. I absolutely think that if there is an attack, it would definitely make it even more definitive, but I can't say that the result of that will necessarily be what we all want to hope, which is a better future for the Iranian Persian people.
All right, Asher, and your take. Do you think we'll see the end of the Islamic Republic in the near future?
I think the Islamic Republic has no answers to the economic crisis, and which are, by the way, impacting also the 5 million besieged. They're also going home and they don't have enough money for food, and when they turn on the faucet, the water isn't coming out. But I do think very much, look, we all hope to see Iran integrated into the region, to see warm, open relations between Israel and Iran, to have Iran part of the Abraham Accords or the Cyrus Accords, various other very welcome initiatives. But it does very much remain to be seen whether those calling for democracy or for constitutional monarchy, and also there are different views among the demonstrators, what end game they would like, that we see a liberal, tolerant, open Iran and not another military dictatorship, which I agree is a possibility.
And just before I let you go, I do want to ask you, Colonel Eisen, I want to follow up with one more brief question. In terms of Israel's interest, I mean, what do you believe is in the interest of Israel? A regime change now? Because we've seen some leaders expressing support already for regime change. We know Prime Minister Netanyahu has made that kind of an objective in the past, but you mentioned it could get worse. So what's in Israel's interest today?
I think it could get worse for the Iranian people. I don't necessarily think it would get worse for us. I think that the Islamic regime and its backing of the proxies in the area, a change of regime is better for Israel. If it deteriorates there into a civil war, if we see there something which is worse for the Iranians, my heart can go out to them, but that's not necessarily worse for Israel.
All right, understood. I want to thank our panel for joining us today, Colonel Miri Eisen and Asher Friedman. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israeli updates on your WhatsApp channel. Breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurate. Just scan the QR code on your screen now to join.
The story of the Jewish people has never been about standing still. It's a story of moving forward, of taking responsibility, of protecting what matters, no matter the challenge. That story is still being written today, not with swords, but with stewardship of the land, with the rule of law, and with the determination to secure Israel's future. And on the front lines of that mission stands Regavim. Regavim is a public movement dedicated to defending Israel's national lands and natural resources, in the field, in the courts, and in the public square. Through research, on-the-ground action, and legal advocacy, Regavim works to uphold the rule of law and to ensure that Israel can grow, thrive, and remain rooted in its homeland.
The two babies who died in a tragic incident at an unlicensed daycare in Jerusalem yesterday are expected to be buried tonight. Investigators now say the leading assessment points to extreme heat and dehydration, not poisoning, as the cause of death. Riots took place as ultra-Orthodox rioters tried to prevent autopsies on the bodies. ILTV's Devil Klein has the latest.
The victims were named as Leah Golovenchich, 3 months old, and Aaron Katz, known as Ari, 6 months old. Both died yesterday afternoon at a private daycare operating without a license in the Romema neighborhood. Forensic experts at the Abu Kabir Institute say no signs of poisoning were found on either bodies. Instead, initial findings indicate dehydration, likely caused by extreme heat, in a closed room where the infants were kept. Dozens of infants were evacuated to hospitals across Jerusalem. All were eventually listed in good condition, but were kept under extended observation due to the unknown cause at the time. Investigators say an air conditioning unit in the room was set to an unusually high temperature, a level that can be dangerous and even fatal for infants. One of the babies may have died a significant period of time before the rescue teams had arrived. Police have detained 3 caregivers for questioning. The daycare, which operated in 2 residential apartments and was reportedly overcrowded with unsafe conditions, has now been shut down. The investigation is continuing as authorities examine possible criminal negligence in one of the most shocking childcare tragedies Jerusalem has seen in years. As authorities seek to determine the cause of death of the 2 infants in Jerusalem, violent ultra-Orthodox protests erupted in Jerusalem, Beit Shemesh, and Bnei Brak. Rioters blocked major roads, clashing with police and shouting at law enforcement in an effort to prevent autopsies, which, according to ultra-Orthodox beliefs, do not coincide with religious law.
The IDF reports a sharp drop in terror attacks and Israeli fatalities in Judea and Samaria in 2025, marking the lowest levels since the war began. Though the military warns the threat is far from eliminated. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the details.
According to IDF data, Palestinian terror attacks fell dramatically to just 57 incidents in 2025, compared to 847 attacks in 23 and 504 in 24. The number of Israelis killed in the territories also declined from 35 in 2023 and 41 in 2024 to 20 in 2025. The IDF says this represents a significant operational improvement and the best security situation since the outbreak of the Gaza war, though still worse than pre-war years such as 2021, when just 3 Israelis were killed. The military attributes the decline primarily to large-scale operations inside key refugee camps in Jenin, Tulkarem, Nur al-Shams, where IDF forces took control, demolished terror hubs, and disrupted armed networks early in 2025. During 2025, IDF forces killed 240 Palestinians during counter-terror operations, down from about 500 in each of the previous 2 years. Rock throwing and Molotov cocktail attacks also hit their lowest levels in years, just over 1,000 incidents in 25, down from more than 3,200 in 2023 and over 8,600 in 2021. The IDF reports record seizures, more than 1,300 weapons, and 17 million shekels in terror funds, including cash, cryptocurrency, and high-value assets. Despite the drop in attacks, the IDF says that Palestinian infiltration into Israel remains a major problem. More than 8,600 cases in 25, a figure the Army calls unacceptable. Summing up 2025, security has improved significantly, but the campaign against terrorism in Judea and Samaria is far from over.
Israel police have arrested 10 suspects in southern Israel in a major crackdown on alleged money laundering and large-scale smuggling operations involving drones. The arrests followed a months-long covert investigation led by Lahav 433 in cooperation with Southern District Police, the Tax Authority, and IDF forces. Police say the suspects had purchased hundreds of drones and transferred them to criminal networks, which used the devices to smuggle drugs and weapons across Israel's southern borders. Investigators allege the group operated through front companies, used fictitious invoices, and falsified financial records to conceal income and launder millions of shekels. In coordinated raids earlier today, officers searched homes, seized documents and property for possible confiscation, and took the suspects in for questioning. They're expected to appear before the Beersheba Magistrates Court for remand hearings as the investigation continues. Israeli basketball star Deni Avdija has been left out of the NBA All-Star starting lineups despite a breakout season and strong support from fans in Israel and the United States. However, he remains well-positioned to make the Western Conference team. Just 24 hours after scoring 30 points in a win over Sacramento, it was revealed that Avdija finished 7th in fan voting, falling just short of becoming the first Israeli player to start an NBA All-Star game. The Portland forward is averaging more than 26 points, 7 rebounds, and nearly 7 assists per game this season, numbers that have put him firmly in the All-Star conversation. Avdia can still make history through the coaches' vote to be announced February 1st, as the Western Conference starters include Nikola Jokic, Steph Curry, and others. A sharp cold snap is moving across Israel, with temperatures dropping below seasonal averages in most parts of the country. Strong winds expected in the north, and overnight frost risk. But in the meantime, let's take a look at the weather forecast for today. Strong winds and partly cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 6 degrees Celsius or 44 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see cloudy skies alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 16 degrees Celsius or 61 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels. Keep up with us on social media. That's ILTV_Israel on all platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you for watching.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Good Week Israel, the show where we recap for you some of the positive highlights that have been coming out of Israel from this week. I'm your host, Diva Klein, and coming up on today's show, United Hatzalah boost readiness in a massive simulation drill. Check out the IDF's Alpinist Unit and how they guard Israel's Hermon. And this new Aliyah Initiative is set to bring waves of immigrants to Israel. United Hatzalah, a medical organization dedicated to saving lives in Israel, hold regular drills and simulations to prepare for any case scenario. Think mass casualty incidents, special natural events, and many, many more. Well, with the region on alert right now with the unrest in Iran, United Hatzalah medics gathered to simulate one of the deadliest attacks to hit Israel, the Islamic regime's missile threat. Let's check out how the simulation went and what went on.
On Tuesday night, United Hatzalah volunteers gathered in Kochav Yaakov to conduct a massive ballistic missile drill as a potential war with the Islamic regime in Iran continues to grow. In addition, United Hatzalah announced earlier its readiness to respond to any situation that might arise from an Iranian attack.
Based on the request of the Ministry of Health of Israel, United Hatzalah are also fully prepared to deal with the situation in Iran.
This simulation aims to gear volunteers with necessary tools to face a missile attack from the Islamic Republic. An attack of this proportion had already claimed the lives of 31 Israelis during Operation Rising Lion in June 2025, prompting the Angels in Orange to collaborate with the IDF, Israel Police, and Israel Fire and Rescue Services on a coordinated response simulation drill. Drones and other tactical equipment were utilized, but also a crucial role in Tuesday's drill was the United Hatzalah Psychotrauma Unit, who last deployed to Sydney following the Hanukkah massacre in Bondi Beach, and was on hand to respond to the mentally and emotionally distressed, helping to prevent long-term emotional damage and even trauma. The drill also involved a scenario of a coordinated terrorist infiltration, making sure that all bases were covered. By the conclusion of the drill, the simulated casualties had been treated and evacuated, the infiltration scenarios have been resolved, and command centers had helped detailed operational debriefings. The community quickly returned to routine, but the lessons drawn from the exercise remain immediate and sobering. In Israel, where the civilian front is inseparable from the battlefield, preparation is not theoretical, it's the difference between chaos and control when the unthinkable happens.
United Hatzalah are fully prepared. Our command center, our 1221 dispatch center, and all our volunteers all across Israel are ready to deal with this situation.
And with the mass protests and deadly crackdown by RGC police in Iran, communities from around the globe protested to support the people of Iran.
And as the regime intensifies its crackdown on protesters in Iran, Iranians around the world are taking to the streets, demanding change and urging the international community to act. From London to Paris, Washington to Germany, demonstrations are growing louder by the day. Here's a look at how the Iranian diaspora is making its voice heard. India Naftali reports.
Yes, Lidar, we are seeing protesters gathered outside the Iranian embassy in London, voicing support for demonstrators back home as Iran enters another week of deadly unrest. Chanting anti-government slogans and waving flags, members of the Iranian diaspora called on the international community to act, saying communications with their families inside Iran have been cut and the situation on the ground is rapidly deteriorating.
Iranian people are hostage by a terrorist government for over 75 hours now, and we are disconnected from our loved families and from our sisters and brothers inside Iran, which we know that at the moment they are getting massacred and killed by these terrorists, by machine guns. And we want the world to hear our voice and help us.
Similar scenes are playing out in other parts of the world. In Paris, hundreds marched near the Eiffel Tower, holding signs reading "Free Iran" and burning images of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Donc on est face à un régime barbare et sauvage qui veut massacrer sa population à huis clos.
In Washington, protesters rallied in front of the White House, calling for international support and chanting against Iran's leadership.
Hundreds of Iranian Americans have come from all over the United States right here in front of the White House to tell the world that the people of Iran want change. Now is the time to stand on the side of the people of Iran for their freedom.
And in Germany, members of the Iranian diaspora held their own demonstrations, saying they hoped international pressure could help bring the end to the current regime. As demonstrations continue into their third week, Tehran has threatened retaliation against U.S. military bases and Israel if foreign powers intervene. President Donald Trump has repeatedly warned that the United States could take action if the regime continues to use deadly force against civilians. For Iranians abroad, from London to Paris, Washington to Germany, the message remains urgent, a call for the world to not look away as protesters at home face a crackdown with no end in sight.
Thank you, India, for the report. And what's also interesting to note is the lack of protests from the Free Palestine protesters, those who for the past 2 years have claimed they care so deeply about human rights. And yet now, when innocent civilians are being killed in the streets, they remain silent. It seems they only protest against Israel. Any other country where real human rights atrocities occur? Crickets.
The IDF has an array of special units, but did you know we have troops stationed on the snowy Mount Hermon area, protecting Israel's only operating ski slopes? Well, we actually just got brand new photos and videos from the Alpinist Unit activities, and you absolutely have to see it. Take a look.
And the Israel Defense Forces Elite Alpinist Unit has completed a rare and highly specialized training cycle on Mount Hermon, preparing for combat and defense in some of the harshest conditions in the region. The Reservist Special Forces Unit, which specializes in operations in snow, ice, and extreme cold, trained this year at the summit of Mount Hermon, an area that was in Syrian hands until the fall of the Assad regime in December 2024. During the exercises, troops practiced operating in steep, complex mountainous terrain using specialized equipment designed for extreme weather and heavy snow. The IDF says the training is critical for maintaining operational readiness in the northern arena, where weather can be as much of a challenge as any adversary. In recent days, the unit took part in a mission on Mount Hermon and in the Golan Heights aimed at protecting the area and enabling the safe reopening of Israel's only ski site to visitors. Mount Hermon is the only place in Israel with guaranteed winter snow. The ski resort, located on the southeastern slopes of the mountain, had been closed for more than a year during the war with Hezbollah after damage to ski lifts from the rocket fire. The site has since reopened with limited access, including a cable car and sledding areas with security provided by IDF forces on the ground. And meanwhile, Israel is bracing for a powerful winter storm set to hit tonight, bringing fierce winds, heavy rain, flooding risks, and the first widespread snow threat of the season. In the north, heavy snow is expected on Mount Hermon, with several centimeters of accumulation possible in the northern Golan Heights. The Israel Meteorological Service warns of strong winds with gusts topping 100 kilometers per hour, similar to the storm just days ago that caused widespread damage.
Well, Israel and Germany are boosting relations, expanding way beyond military cooperation, and actually etching toward cybersecurity and innovative tech. Have a look.
Israel and Germany have signed a historic security partnership, marking a major step in joint defense against shared threats, with Israel's leadership in defense, cybersecurity, and advanced technology now formally recognized on the global stage. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu linked Iran's growing threat to regional and international stability to the new Defense and Cybersecurity Pact signed in Jerusalem with German Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt. Netanyahu said Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis, pose a direct danger not only to Israel, but to the entire region and beyond. The agreement establishes deep cooperation in cybersecurity, counterterrorism, and advanced technologies, and signals a clear commitment to joint security action. Minister Dobrindt called the pact a new strategic level of partnership rooted in Germany's historic responsibility and its commitment to Israel's security. Netanyahu highlighted existing defense cooperation, including the delivery of Israel's Arrow 3 missile defense system to Germany last December, capable of intercepting long-range ballistic missiles. The prime minister said the agreement underscores Israel's strengthening ties with major powers, adding that Israel is, quote, on an upward trend in security and international cooperation, despite pressure from parts of Europe.
I attach enormous importance to the cooperation, overall cooperation between Israel and Germany, and especially Israel and Germany on this question of cybersecurity, which is one of the main threats to our internal security and in many ways also our infrastructure and other threats.
And it's not just Germany Israel is boosting allyship with. Japan's foreign ministry delegation was just in Israel last week. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar reaffirmed their commitment to Israel from October 7th until now. Have a look.
The visit of Japan's foreign minister, his first bilateral trip since taking office in October, is already being seen as a clear signal of the strong friendship and shared values between Israel and Japan. Sa'ar called the two nations ancient civilizations with common interests and democratic principles, and stressed that Israel and Japan must deepen strategic and security cooperation, particularly in a changing global landscape. Sa'ar thanked Japan for its support since the October 7th massacre.
We thank Japan, which since October 7th has recognized Israel's right to defend itself, has called for the unconditional release of our hostages, and has imposed sanctions on Hamas leaders. We will work together to strengthen bilateral relations across all fields between our countries and nations.
Motegi, serving his second term as foreign minister, visited following a series of high-level exchanges, including Prime Minister Netanyahu's meeting with a large Japanese delegation of lawmakers, underscoring Japan's growing role as a key diplomatic and security partner for Israel. Israeli officials say that this visit not only deepens strategic ties, but also sends a strong signal that Jerusalem is looking to broaden its alliances beyond the region, strengthening diplomatic, security, and economic cooperation with Asia.
First of all, let me once again express my deepest condolences to the victims of the terrorist attacks on October 7th. And earlier today, before coming here, I visited the music festival site memorial in the city of Rain, one of the attack sites, and with deep sorrow, I renewed my strong conviction that terrorism is absolutely unacceptable under any circumstances. And Japan has strongly condemned the brutal acts of terror committed by Hamas, and we maintain that Hamas must be disarmed in accordance with the comprehensive plan. To improve the situation surrounding Israel and Palestine, Japan has maintained good relations with both Israel and Palestine, and building upon such relationship of trust, with this visit, I aim to convey Japan's candid views on concrete steps to be taken to both sides, and also explain how Japan intends to extend its cooperation with you all.
How exciting when a new batch of immigrants finds its way home to Israel. Well, the Ministry of Aliyah and Integration are expanding their initiatives to encourage more Aliyah to the Holy Land. Have a look.
Against the backdrop of a sharp and alarming rise in anti-Semitism across the West, Israel has greenlit a wide-ranging national plan to encourage large-scale Aliyah from countries including France, Britain, Canada, and Australia. The news comes as official data shows anti-Semitic incidents skyrocketing, up more than 500% in Canada, 450% in Britain, 350% in France, and nearly 400% in Australia over the past 3 years. At the same time, applications for Aliyah have surged, but officials say too many potential immigrants are still getting stuck in bureaucracy or struggling with housing, employment, and absorption concerns. The new program seeks to remove those barriers. It includes fast-tracked visa approvals within 30 days and a full digital system for document transfers. Financially, the plan offers monthly absorption grants for the first year, up to 3,400 shekels for large families, or about $1,000 without a rental requirement. Additional housing assistance will follow, including enhanced rent support for those settling in the north, the south, and Judea and Samaria. The program also expands Hebrew studies, educational support for children, academic and professional guidance, and incentives for employers to hire new immigrants. Local authorities will receive extra funding if they agree to absorb larger numbers of newcomers. The overall budget is expected to reach hundreds of millions of shekels through 2029, with implementation led by Aliyah and Integration Minister Ophir Sofer and the Interministerial Task Force. Officials say the goal is clear: to turn today's fear and pressure on Jewish communities abroad into a historic opportunity to strengthen Israel demographically, both economically and socially, at a time of national and global challenge.
And if there's one program you absolutely must know by JNF USA, it's the Faculty Fellowship Program, where educators get the chance to come to Israel, tour the country, and learn valuable lessons that they can later take back with them to campus. Let's hear what 2 university professors had to say about their trip.
Well, Jewish National Fund USA's Faculty Fellowship Program in Israel recently wrapped up. The program bringing non-Jewish American college and university professors to Israel for an immersive, eye-opening experience. Today, we're speaking with 2 distinguished participants, Paul Yankee and Kathy Elias, to share how this trip helped shape their perspectives and strengthen their narratives. Paul and Kathy, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, how have your preconceived notions of Israel been challenged? Paul, let's start with you.
Thank you. I have been very excited about being in Israel and experiencing Israel. I came very curious. And the preconceived elements that I might have had was that there was very much a living under pressure, but what I also saw was a stronger resilience and a stronger resolve than I had expected. And with that, great insight, great ability, and also a very caring heart in many different ways. So I didn't come with necessarily super strong preconceptions one way or the other. I had a great respect already for Israel coming from my days working in technology and the intelligence that they bring into that space. And so I was really wanting to understand more how this all works, how these countries that are having such disparate views on things able to coincide together.
And Kathy, can you share from your perspective your experience as well?
Well, I want to point out that I'm coming this time on the Faculty Fellowship as an ambassador. So I've been here before, and so this is the second time around. And so I'm looking at very different things. The first time around, a lot of what Paul said, looking at all the innovation, looking at all the really wonderful things that have gone on in terms of research and all in Israel. But this time I've come and I've tried to focus more on the people. And coming from a university that had a lot of problems and a lot of negative actions on campus, I tried to talk to a lot of students also when I was here. And one of the things, I want to bring back that I think is extremely important to our students is just how much many of the students here, of course, are very similar in what they like about government, what they don't like about government, their criticisms, but also their desire to live the same kind of good life and their willingness to really want to engage with students in the United States and be heard.
Paul, what will you be taking back with you to campus from what you've learned or experienced here on the program?
I'll first off say we've had a very full 12 days of visiting a lot of different universities, a lot of different organizations, businesses, museums. And I will tell you, my mind is still very much processing. I'm looking forward to bringing all this together, letting it gel. But one thing that I have seen is I think there's a great need in my university setting and in my element of the areas of influence I have to consider more the consequences of things. And that's something that I've definitely seen be very paramount in Israel is consequences are real and deep for everything that comes up. And I think there can be this context of not considering always the consequences, how it plays out to all the related constituents to different elements that come up. So that's one piece that I want to bring out. I also want to bring more of a perspective of what's really happening, what's really going on. I think when you're able to experience different cultures, different areas, the best way, without any question, to do it is to actually be there. And JNF affords that possibility for people, particularly for academics in this situation.
All right, Kathy, Elias, and Paul Yankee, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today and sharing with us your insights and experiences.
Thank you very much for having us.
Now let's hear once again from the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews to hear all of the latest fellowship news that is sure to put a smile on your face.
Shalom from here in Israel, and here are 2 fellowship projects that you should know about this week. Number 1, meet Galina, an incredible Jewish woman who's 96 years old and still lives in the same small village in Ukraine that she was born and raised in. This month, the fellowship went and delivered to Galina not only a food box, but we delivered her warm clothing, blankets, medicine, everything she needs to survive the winter. Suddenly, she sits alone in her home in Ukraine, but she feels the warmth and glory of God, that everyone is connected and that we are there to care for her. Number 2, the fellowship staff recently went to Leket, which saves produce from the fields of Israel and distributes it to the poor. The fellowship partners with Leket to provide soups to the elderly during the winter that we make from these rescued vegetables, and we even provided them with a new truck. This week we went to Kiryat Shmona, which is on Israel's northernmost border. As we pulled up, the elderly, the families came, people took food to bring back to their homebound neighbors. That not only is the fellowship feeding the hungry, but we are enabling others in these most far off, poor, war-torn cities to create community and to support each other. Well, there you have it, 2 projects out of so many of the fellowship that you are part of. Join me next week to learn more about the work of the fellowship on the ground. Shalom.
And that's all for today's Good Week Israel. I hope we've helped to deliver some positive news that you get to now take with you into this week ahead. As always, I am Devo Klein. Take care. Thank you so much for watching.
Nearly 30 American college student leaders from diverse faith backgrounds are ringing in the new year in Israel while participating in Jewish National Fund USA's Caravan for Democracy. The 7-day fully subsidized program equips attendees with the confidence to return to their college campuses and advocate for informed, constructive dialogue about Israel and the Middle East with their peers. Joining us today are 2 Caravan for Democracy students to share their experiences, Andrew Norton and Polly Johnston. Thank you so much for being here. Andrew, let's start with you. Why did you, as a non-Jewish student leader, want to come to Israel at this particular time?
Reasons. First one is this is the Holy Land. I want to see as a devout Christian where my faith comes from, right? I want to see the Bible come alive. I want to see the steps and the places and the things that make my faith so true, much more than believing. And this is the place to do that. And so that was the first reason. And secondly, it is, of course, to understand truly the Jewish side of this war, to understand the Israeli side of this war, to understand kind of just the reality of what's happening over here. I find myself in conversation with students from all different races and places, and I often see that they have opinions and they have arguments and they want to talk and debate. And I kind of hit an information block, and that information block comes when you haven't physically seen, you haven't physically viewed the place that you're thinking about, the place that you're talking about, the place that you're trying to strive and defend. And so that was one of the reasons, in addition to my faith, that I wanted to come out and truly see Israel.
And you, Polly? Very much the same situation, but also I think there's no better time to come to Israel. We are just getting out of the post-war issues and also awaiting the last hostage to come home. And I think that's a really important thing because now we can see the life and the joy and the resilience of the Israeli people and how connected everyone is. But also back home, I have a lot of Jewish friends and family friends. So this is very personal as well, especially knowing that some friends are here in Israel right now. Polly, what has been the most surprising part of your experience? I think one of the most surprising parts is how joyful and kind everyone is. I think we back home in the United States are given this one perception that Israel is very similar. Everyone's the same. Everyone comes from the same background, and it's very oppressive and cruel. And that's just not the case at all. Everyone has their own opinions, and everyone comes from a different background, and they have different reasons for why they believe in what they believe. And they're not afraid to tell you, and it's absolutely wonderful.
Andrew, how will Caravan for Democracy impact you as a leader and an ally when you return to campus?
Perception. I think that I'm thankful to the Jewish National Fund, first off, for this opportunity. And in this opportunity, one of the things they talked about was you're going to physically see this perspective that's going to be able to handle and guide your conversation back home. And so that's truly what it's done. Out here, Caravan for Democracy has quite literally caravan us across Israel to see just all the different places, the points for more than just the Jewish religion, all of them, including our own. And so it's one of those things where you can truly now see, understand, have lived it, have experienced it to a degree that helps carry and guide this conversation towards a reality that we seek, right? A reality that offers peace, that offers safety, that offers respect for Jewish students, Jewish people, the religion as a whole, as well as the entire country of Israel.
Polly, what's one thing about Israel that you want to make sure your peers know?
Honestly, I want to make sure that they know everyone is connected and everyone is affected by what happens to the state of Israel and to the people of Israel. I don't think people back home understand quite how fully connected everyone is and how well people can get along despite their differences.
And you, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that what we really want to bring home is kind of also the opportunity for people to kind of strive and engage in conversation more, engage in conversation that directs people towards the reality truth, right? I talked about the perspective and things like that I love. And so that's something that I learned here is really just the perspective that says, man, this is a welcoming group of people. This is the home of three religions. This is a land that offers and wants and seeks peace with everything. And so that's the one thing I want to be able to share, bring to people, and kind of pass forward.
Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As the largest provider of Israel engagement programs in the U.S., Jewish National Fund USA inspires a lifelong Zionist identity through youth, travel, and cultural experiences, helping individuals stay connected to the land and people of Israel for life. The organization also offers high school and college students of all backgrounds the opportunity to experience Israel in diverse ways that extend far beyond the classroom. To learn more, visit jnf.org.
As the potential of war with the Islamic Republic remains high, the Israel Defense Forces say they are operating at peak readiness on all fronts while urging the public to remain calm and rely only on official information. IDF spokesman Brigadier General Effie Defrin said the Army has been closely monitoring developments in recent weeks, with the Chief of Staff holding continuous situational assessments with all relevant authorities. The IDF has strengthened capabilities, preparing for a wide range of scenarios, both defensive and offensive. Defrin acknowledged growing public concern, but stressed that there's no change at this stage to the Home Front Command guidelines and warned against the spread of rumors.
לאורך השבועות האחרונים, וביתר שאת בימים האחרונים, אנחנו עוקבים אחר ההתפתחויות באזור. בהתאם לכך, הרמטכ"ל מקיים מערכות מצב שוטפות עם כל הגורמים הרלוונטיים. האחריות שלנו בצה"ל היא לנהל את המצב בצורה שקולה, מקצועית ואחראית. אנחנו פועלים במוכנות מלאה למגוון רחב של תרחישים. בשבועות האחרונים חיזקנו יכולות והגברנו את המוכנות בכל הגבולות. כפי שאמר הרמטכ"ל אתמול בביקור במערך ההגנה האווירית, חשוב שכל אזרח בישראל ידע, צה"ל ערוך ומוכן כל העת, ובאופן נרחב, גם בהגנה וגם בהתקפה. אנחנו מבינים היטב את תחושת אי-הוודאות והדריכות שנוצרה בימים האחרונים, שבהם השיח הציבורי והתקשורתי עוסק בהתפתחויות האזוריות. זה טבעי וזה מובן לחלוטין.
Israel's only English news channel bringing you the headlines that matter every hour straight from the center of where it's all unfolding.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Caleb Ben David, coming to you live from Israel, breaking down all of the biggest headlines coming out of the region. Here are the latest developments. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued one of his toughest warnings yet to Iran, saying that if the Islamic Republic attempts to assassinate him, the U.S. would respond so forcefully that Iran would be wiped off the face of this earth.
They shouldn't be doing it, but I've left notification. Anything ever happens, we're going to blow the whole country is going to get blown up. So we've, originally Biden should have said something. When they made a statement, we always said, why isn't Biden saying anything? Because he didn't. But a president has to defend a president. Like if I were here and they were making that threat to somebody, not even a president, but somebody like they did with me, I would absolutely hit them so hard. But I have very firm instructions. Anything happens, they're going to wipe them off the face of this earth.
Now, Trump's comments follow recent reports that Iran has warned the president against any action to be taken against the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, calling such steps a cause for total war. While Trump said strong military options remain available, he has not ordered a strike, and it remains unclear how far Washington is willing to go if Iran's regime continues to threaten American leaders or interests and massacre its own people opposing the Ayatollah's rule. Meanwhile, the U.S. continues its buildup of military forces in the region, with the carrier USS Abraham Lincoln expected to arrive later this week in Mideast waters. And turning now to Gaza, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted U.S. President Trump's invitation to join the newly formed Board of Peace. This according to a statement from the Prime Minister's office. The initiative, led and chaired for life by President Trump, is aimed at resolving global conflicts with an initial focus on the Gaza Strip. Israel now joins Argentina, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Hungary, Kazakhstan, Morocco, the United Arab Emirates, Kosovo, and Vietnam in accepting the invitation. Sweden, Norway, and France have rejected joining, while other nations are weighing the offer, some reportedly concerned over an invitation extended to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Board of Peace is supposed to oversee the executive board administering Gaza, which includes officials from Turkey and Qatar, despite Israel's objections to their inclusion. Diplomats have warned that the new Board of Peace could undermine the role of the UN, but supporters say it could offer a new path for resolving international conflicts. Trump also has denounced the role as the UN as unhelpful. Meanwhile, President Trump is pushing to move ahead with Phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire, as senior Israeli officials say the current stalemate is helping Hamas, not Israel. According to senior Israeli officials, moving to Phase 2 serves Israel's interests regardless of the hostage issue, but they warn that the current pause allows Hamas to receive aid and funding, rebuild military capabilities, and deepen its control over Gaza's population. These officials say Phase 2 should require Hamas to disarm and dismantle its military infrastructure, a demand they believe Hamas is unlikely to accept. Hamas would be given a deadline after which Israel could return to military action. Now, Israel's High Court of Justice has ruled that autopsies will not be performed on the two infants who died at an unlicensed, overcrowded daycare in Jerusalem. This after violent ultra-Orthodox riots erupted in protest, highlighting the growing social divide between Israel's Haredi sector and the rest of the country. Now, the court overturned a lower court decision that had approved postmortems, ruling that invasive autopsies are unnecessary if other medical tests could confirm the cause of death. The decision allowed 3-month-old Leah Golovenchich and 6-month-old Aaron Katz to be buried without further delay. The families who are ultra-Orthodox opposed autopsies on religious grounds. The strict interpretation of Jewish law generally prohibits autopsies, viewing the human body as sacred and calling for quick burial, unless the procedure can clearly save another life. Police believe the infants died from heat exhaustion and dehydration, possibly due to a malfunctioning heating system in a sealed room. Meanwhile, two caregivers from the daycare remain in custody, with police investigating possible reckless homicide and criminal negligence. The case and the violent protest it sparked has added to the social tensions generated by the public debate over the military deferments that are granted to the ultra-Orthodox sector and the efforts to find a legislative solution. Well, and that ends our update coming to you on the hour. Stay tuned for more updates, or of course you can go to our app. You see the QR code on your screen. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV. Thank you for joining us here on Color Ben David.
There's a small fear I have that the Americans will do a deal with the regime.
There's where I don't think you're right. I don't think he does want to negotiate with him. What I'm obviously hoping for is that there will be strikes both on the ballistic missile program and on the leaders. I think it's, high time to assassinate those Ayatollahs, and especially Khamenei.
Shalom and welcome to another episode of Israel UnDiplomatic. I'm Mark Regev, and as per usual, I'm here with my co-host, Ruthie Bloom. Ruthie, what a few days we're having, even longer with this stuff going on in Iran. Is it more of the same, or are we going to see some revolutionary changes?
Well, I know you don't always agree with me on this point, but I have to say that it doesn't look like more of the same. First of all, what we're seeing, aside from the fact that these demonstrations have been going on day after day, and the protesters are being gunned down in the streets across the Islamic Republic, and they're not letting up in spite of being gunned down. We don't know the exact number. There are all kinds of quotes. Some say 2,000 people have been killed. Some say 20,000. It's not clear because aside from the fact that the regime shut down all the internet, and yes, Elon Musk provided Starlink, it's still very vague about what's going on there. But I will say one thing. I am sure that President Trump is planning a major operation, military operation, not just cyber and all that, and that possibly Israel will be or is already involved.
So first of all, on the issue of the numbers, it's true. We don't know the numbers. The regime, I think, said it was like in the 2000 or something. And then the Iranian opposition group, the Iranian television opposition channel, said 12,000. And that's already yesterday. It could be more today. What's interesting is the media, the international media, the Western media is very careful with the numbers and just as open to something that we're not going to go into. But when they used Hamas's numbers out of Gaza, they never had a problem with using those numbers, did they? But let's leave that aside. The numbers are not clear of the number of deaths, but what is clear is the regime is being ruthless. And that's why, to a certain extent, I'd like to have your confidence that the regime is not going to survive, but I cannot have that confidence because, I think there's a strong probability the regime won't survive. In my New Year predictions, I said the regime would fall, but I can't be totally sure precisely because they are ruthless, because they are willing to gun down people, that you've got the Basij and the Revolutionary Guards and these people who are like the Waffen-SS. They are ideologically committed to the regime's survival. They also think that they themselves personally and their families will pay a huge price if the regime falls. The retribution of the Iranian people, the justified retribution of the Iranian people against the apparatus of the state that oppressed them so much and massacred their people and so forth. And so I think a clear thing to see how this is going, there are a number of factors which we can discuss, but are there cracks in the ruling regime? Because if these people are simply willing to keep massacring and murdering all the opposition, so this can become a meat grinder. This can go on for ages.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, when I said that I'm sure President Trump is planning a major operation, I did not say that that will cause the regime to immediately fall. And there I agree with you that I don't think that that's so imminent for a few reasons. But that doesn't mean that it's not on the way to falling. You know, the timeline, I don't have the timeline. But this is the only way. The regime will not fall because of protests in the street. And it won't even fall because of military attacks on ballistic missiles or perhaps even on figures like the Ayatollah Khamenei. What makes the regime crack or fall, what would make the regime fall, is if the Revolutionary Guards and Basij and the army begin to defect. That would cause it to fall. And we're not seeing that yet, but I believe that more military strikes will instill fear in the Revolutionary Guards, that they're just the way with Hezbollah in Lebanon, you know, with the beeper operation. Once you instill fear in these animals, you cause them to rethink what side they've got to be on. Many might try to flee. We already know that the Iranian foreign minister, and I'm going to say that with quotes, okay, is in Lebanon, took his wife and kids to Lebanon, you know, for talks with the Lebanese government about Hezbollah and all that. But come on, he didn't have to bring his wife and kids. It's clear that this was his way of escaping. And so if we see more of that, what I'm obviously hoping for is that there will be strikes both on the ballistic missile program, ballistic missiles themselves, and on the leaders. The leadership. I think it's, you know, high time to assassinate those Ayatollahs and especially Khamenei, and that sends a clear message. That's what I'm hoping for. I don't know if that's in the cards, but I am sure that behind the scenes, both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are discussing this daily.
I'm sure you're correct. I'm sure there's very close coordination between Israel and the United States. It doesn't mean that, you know, we share the same strategic objectives. It doesn't mean we agree on everything as this crisis develops. There's a small fear I have that the Americans will do a deal with the regime, that all this talk about an attack, all this talk about sanctions, all this talk about supporting the demonstrators is actually a way to put pressure on the regime to agree to Trump's longstanding demands that they have to end their military nuclear program. And that because he's a negotiator, because as everyone says, it's almost a cliche today, he's a transactional president, they are weak. They will now agree to the deal that he wants. And therefore, he'll make a deal with the regime that will allow this regime, maybe much more limited in what it can do, but he'll allow the regime to stay in power. And all those people who want democracy in Iran will be disappointed. Maybe not unlike Venezuela. We've seen how Trump has dealt with Venezuela. He's decapitated an authoritarian regime. That regime now, according to the Trump understanding, and he could be 100% correct, will now act more in the American interest and not be opposed to America. Is that his plan also for Iran?
Now, see, there I disagree with you, and I think, and what we're going to see.
I was asking a question. I was not.
You were asking a question, but what I think is this. There are a few reasons. First of all, I think the word democracy, we don't hear that a lot. We hear the word democracy bandied about when the isolationists within the Republican Party want to talk about Iraq. They say, oh, yes, you know, the neocons thought we were going to democratize Iraq, and look what happened, and it was a disaster. And they use the word democracy in that way, you know, oh, you're naive, you're going to...
Nation building.
Nation building, democracy. So forget the word democracy for a minute. Because you know what? All the people who said when the war in Gaza started, but what about the day after? What about the day after? And, you know, it was, first of all, let's kill the enemy. Okay, what about the day after? The day after happens along the way you're planning that. That's number one. And I don't think Trump ever said, you know, democracy. But he has another reason that I think that he has gone out so far on a limb And he has said, not only did he post this on Truth Social yesterday, but he also gave a speech. And let's hear what he actually had to say from the horse's mouth, as we say.
To all Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions if possible, and save the name of the killers and the abusers that are abusing you. You're being very badly abused. If the numbers are right now, I hear 5 different sets of numbers. I hear numbers, look, 1 death is too much. But I hear much lower numbers, and then I hear much higher numbers. But I say save their names because they'll pay a very big price. And I've canceled all meetings with the Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. And all I say to them is help is on its way. You saw that I put tariffs on anybody doing business with Iran. Just went into effect today. And I say make Iran great again. You know, it was a great country until these monsters came in and took it over.
So you see, Mark, he is not only saying help is on its way and that he canceled all talks with the Iranian, with the regime. And you keep saying, yes, but, you know, he's transactional. And therefore, what he's trying to do is they'll stop the killing and then he wants to negotiate about the nuclear program. But he already believes that he has killed the nuclear program, basically. All right. So there's where I don't think you're right. I don't think he does want to negotiate with them. And he didn't say democracy. He said, make Iran great again. Iran wasn't a democracy under the Shah. It was modernizing. The Shah was modernizing. It was. And the thing is, it wasn't an Islamist, vile Islamist, not just Islamist republic. There are most Iranians were Zoroastrian in their background, and they were quite modern, etc. So I believe making those kind of statements means we're on the way. What is we're on the way? It means planes, bombs. I don't know about boots on the ground, but certainly bombs hitting the ground.
So I'll respond to a few things. I mean, I listen to Trump and I listen to every word, and the words he uses are important, especially since he wrote it, he posted it, and then he repeated the same words, which means the formulation is very clever. First of all, when he tells the people to write down the names of the people involved in massacring the protesters, right? That's a clear message. That's a threat, and that will encourage, hopefully, and we have to see the effect, but I think the desire is to see the regime's elements of internal security falling apart, that they won't follow the orders, that they'll fear the retribution of the people together with the retribution of the United States. That's basically what he said. I mean, when Trump says to them, write down the names of the people oppressing you, the people killing you, that's a very important message. At the same time, he tells the Iranian people, the protesters, we are behind you. Right? He doesn't say exactly what we're going to do, but we are behind you. So he's telling them, you know, keep at it. We are behind you. And when the most powerful country in the world says that's an important message. And you have a situation today where, because of the 12-day war, the regime was exposed as being weak. Israel played an important part of that. America played part in that. When Israeli planes and U.S. planes could fly over Iran, Israeli planes were flying over Tehran, their capital, and not a single Israeli plane is shot down, that their air defenses are destroyed, yes, that we can hit any target that we want to in Iran, they are exposed as being weak, and no authoritarian regime can survive if it's seen as being weak. Its own people will rise up and say, we don't want you anymore. The regime years ago lost any semblance of legitimacy. Maybe in the early years of the regime, it had some sort of popular legitimacy. Yes. No one believes the ideology of that regime anymore. The people who support the regime are there because they're related to the regime, to the corruption. They're getting kickbacks or whatever it is. The ideological element behind the regime died long ago. It's like communism in the Soviet Union during the Brezhnev period. No one believes the official state ideology anymore. And what is interesting is I saw part of the protesters were actually protesting against mosques. There were even vandalism against mosques. So they're not against religion, I presume, but they see the mosques in the cities of Tehran. They are apparatus of the regime. And that's because they're the regime, and people don't believe it anymore. And so they've lost legitimacy. They've lost a presence that they are all-powerful. The situation in Iran is terrible. The economic situation, the currency, the rial, it's not worth anything today. It's literally in the toilet. There's not energy in the Iranian cities. People don't have power. There's not water to drink in Tehran and in other cities. There's problem with supplies of basic things. Their infrastructure is falling apart, right? This is a country that could have been one of the most successful and richest countries on the planet. and it's a failed state, and the failure is bigger every day. And the people want better. And if I can say one last thing that is optimistic, is that there was a time when Iran and Israel had a good relationship. Before this government, the Islamic Republic, was established, when Iran was still a monarchy under the Shah, and he had his faults, right? No one's saying that he was a great Democrat. But under that period of time, Israel and Iran had a good relationship. Israelis would visit Iran. I, as a teenager, visited Tehran before the revolution. And it was, El Al was flying there. I took a flight from there. If there is regime change in Iran, it's a major, not only regional, but global game changer for the better. It is a huge, huge change. Where is Hezbollah without Iran? Where is Hamas without Iran? Where are the Houthis without Iran? We saw what happened to Cuba when the Soviet Union fell apart. So it'll be even more so with Iran's proxies. Without the financial, logistic, military support that they get from the Iranian government, they are a shadow of their former selves in the terms of their power. It really totally changes the Middle East. If Iran becomes a friend of America and Israel, it changes the whole dynamic in the Middle East. It's a revolutionary, it's a ground change. No one will be talking about the Abraham Accords because the new relationship with Iran will echo. And then you'll find countries in the Arab world competing with Iran, who is the better friend of Israel and the United States? Because that's clearly where the direction of history will be.
Okay, well, it could be in several years from now that your scenario comes true. We don't know because, things happen so quickly in the Middle East. And that's a very rosy picture, given the fact that Trump is also friends with Turkey, friends with the Syrian leader. There are several problems here. And Saudi Arabia, which has said, we're not going to let you use our airspace and even some of the Abraham Accords partners are saying, we don't support an American attack on Iran. So, the Abraham Accords also are a little shaky at the moment, I would say. But I would say that one of the main reasons that President Trump cannot back down is because he does not want to be seen as resembling in any shape or form Obama, who openly abandoned the Iranian people. When Obama was inaugurated in 2009, there were protests in the streets of Iran over the stolen election. And Obama basically said, well, we have to let the Iranians...
You wrote a book about this.
I did. I wrote a book about how Obama basically followed in Jimmy Carter's path and Islamized the whole Middle East, basically. But the point is, at that time, his whole attitude was, no, we want to outreach to the Muslim world. And of course, what he meant by the Muslim world is not the moderate Muslim world. He was outreaching to the Muslim Brotherhood, to all the bad guys. And he said, we have to let the Iranian people make their choices. And Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, said, we're watching, we're observing what's going on. And of course, the protesters were gunned down. And that was basically, that was the end of that. And there is no way that President Trump is going to allow the New York Times or the Washington Post or anybody else to say, you see, it's like in the end, American foreign policy is like Obama. No way is he going to let that happen.
So I want to respond to two things you said. I think you're 100% correct. Trump sees himself as the anti-Obama. And we saw it with the previous American red line. Obama made the famous red line about Syria. If Assad uses chemical weapons against his own people, there will be consequences. In the end, he pulled right back, and there was some Mickey Mouse deal on the chemical weapons and so forth. But Assad didn't pay consequences. And when Trump came into office and he used chemical weapons, immediately there were military strikes. And actually, I'm not sure that after that the Assad regime actually used chemical weapons against its own people again, because there were immediate military consequences by the United States. And so that's why I think also for President Trump, if he draws a red line, he knows the importance of keeping it because he is the anti-Obama. On the other issue, I want to take issue with something that you said about the Abraham Accords countries. So the Saudis can say what they say. The more important thing is what the Saudis do. And we know in the past, and we're talking basing on, press reports, we're no longer, inside government and know all the secrets. We're now basing on what's open sources. We know that in the past, when there was Iranian missile attacks on Israel, there are reports that Saudi Arabia allowed its airspace to be used to shoot down those missiles. We know that during the Gulf, other Arab countries as well involved across the Gulf, and Jordan and others, that can say all the pro-Arab, anti-Israel things at the UN, but when it came to cooperating in defending us against Iranian missiles, they were there with tangible support. And here I want to remind you that during the 2 years of war that we went through in Gaza and in Lebanon and in Iran, Lufthansa stopped flying to Israel, the German airline, British Airways stopped flying to Israel, Air France stopped flying to Israel, a bunch of American airlines stopped flying to Israel, yes? Every day from the Emirates, from the UAE, Fly Dubai was coming to Israel, and Etihad was flying to Israel. So to say to me and to our listeners that the Abraham Accords don't mean anything, I think the Abraham Accords are there. And once again, I have optimism. If there is change in Iran, and once again, the jury is still out, this regime could fight, this regime could be brutal, it might not be over. But when this regime falls, and it will fall, you could have a very interesting positive dynamic over who is more friendly with America, the Arab countries or the Persians, who is more friendly with Israel. I'll tell you what my historic background is. You know, Greece and Cyprus for years were very standoffish with Israel. But when Israel had a good relationship with Turkey, they suddenly decided they have to have a better relationship with Israel. And so sometimes people compete to be your friend, who's your most important friend, and I think that could be a very positive dynamic if there is a revolution in Iran.
Well, for sure, and I didn't say that the Abraham Accords have no meaning. I said that they are shaky. At first, one of the things we counted on was this was an anti-Iran axis. And that was one of the reasons that we assumed or hoped or whatever that Saudi Arabia was on the way to joining them, or at least giving tacit approval, etc. But now Saudi Arabia is openly siding with Iran, and Turkey is openly siding with Iran, and the UAE said to Trump, don't attack Iran. I meant it's shaky because in the end, you're right. They want to compete for America's attention, but America, Trump already gave, he gave such a warm bath to Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, and he also said he just loves Erdogan of Turkey, and he also said that the Syrian leader is such a great guy, handsome guy, all that. Meanwhile, in Syria, Kurds are being massacred, all right? So I'm just saying, these people don't change their stripes so much. These jihadists do not just wake up one day and stop being jihadists. So there is where I'm skeptical. Where I'm not skeptical is in Trump's intention to conduct a serious military operation that is in the works right now. Obviously, I could be wrong, and maybe it's wishful thinking. But from what I'm seeing, I just highly doubt Trump is just going to say, I made all these grandiose statements, and now I'm going to back down. I just find it hard to believe. Based on his past behavior, that's not what he does.
There are many experts who one can hear in the media, experts who will say things like, if America and Israel attack Iran, so then Iranian nationalism takes over, and that unites the people around the regime. And of course, that's rubbish. When people hate the regime, and they do hate the regime, and I think if there is a shooting war, if America decides to do a shooting war, if there's an Iranian provocation and Israel joins in the shooting war, and once again, I don't think Israel would do it out of the blue, but if there was an Iranian provocation against Israel, we could. I think we have to choose our targets very carefully. And what we saw in the 12-day war is that Israel and the United States have the ability to be very, very surgical. So we could target the bases of the Revolutionary Guards and the besieged, the people who are oppressing the civilians. I don't think anyone in the protest movement is going to be against us doing that. We could hit the gates, as we've done in the past, to some of the prisons where they're holding all the people being detained to allow them to escape. I don't think people would blame us for that. We could hit regime targets like the Iranian parliament, which is, of course, a hotbed for extremism, and because the extreme faction of the regime controls the parliament. We could hit the presidential palace. We could hit we could actually surgically target key regime figures like the most supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei. In other words, we could do strikes back that would hurt the regime and it would actually energize the protesters.
Well, definitely. And that's what I'm hoping for. And that's what I believe is about to happen. Also, the protesters have been burning down government buildings and all that. We don't know to what extent, but we know that's definitely happening, and it's happening every night. And, as I say, I don't know what about the day after, et cetera, but I know that what you pointed out about all these years, we're saying if the regime is attacked or the nuclear program is attacked, then the Iranians will rally around the regime. Whether that was true in the past or not, I don't know. But I can tell you one thing. When Khomeini, not Khamenei, when the original Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned after 15 years in exile in France, returned to Iran to take over when there was the revolution that has lasted since 1979. And in that year is when 52 U.S. diplomats were held hostage for 444 days, by the way. When he disembarked from the airplane and he was asked by journalists reporters at the airport, you Ayatollah, Mr. Ayatollah, Your Majesty or whatever, how does it feel being back in Iran? What does it feel like? And he said, I feel nothing. And what he meant by that was, Iran is irrelevant. It's Islam. It's the Mahdi. It's the 12th Imam. He wanted to spread Islam across the globe, and that's what he cared about, not Iran. He felt nothing. So this business of Iranian patriotism, he didn't even feel it.
There's the famous Henry Kissinger line, I should say now the late Henry Kissinger line, where he said, what's the problem with Iran? The Iranian leadership had to choose whether they're a country or a cause. And they chose the latter. They chose a cause, and that cause was the global Islamic revolution. And if that's your cause, you can't be treated like a normal country. It was their choice. That's what they did. And the end of this regime, as I say, will not just be good for the people of Iran, first and foremost. It'll be good for Israel and for all Iran's neighbors, and it'll be good for the world, because this really is a terrorist, gangsterist, aggressive regime. And for all those reasons, we should be happy they go. I tell you what the question is, and we go back to that you and me no longer work for government. We don't see secret intelligence anymore. But if Benjamin Netanyahu in the Prime Minister's office is reading Mossad's report, and they are saying that there are no signs of cracks in the regime's determination to survive, and so far the regime is holding solid, right? We aren't seeing defections. And if at the same time the CIA is saying the same thing to Trump, that the regime is holding strong and this could go on for ages and it can be a meat grinder because they'll keep shooting the people with impunity and so forth. Under those circumstances, will there be a temptation in Washington to say, let's cut the best deal we can with the regime while it's weak? Part of being a businessman, part of being a real estate tycoon is if the person you're negotiating with is weak, you get the best deal you can. And like in Venezuela, the regime will stay in power.
Well, no, because, first of all, Trump, when asked about all this, he said, of course they want to negotiate. We destroyed their nukes, and now they're on their knees. So it's not as though he's under any illusions. Oh, now let's get the best deal we can. What he thinks is, why I need a deal with them? They have to come begging for their lives from me. Okay, we won, they lost. That's basically his attitude.
He said we want to win.
You are right
Yeah.
that in Washington, there is pressure on Trump from his vice president, J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance's, followers and friends. And one of his close friends is Tucker Carlson, unfortunately. They are pressuring Trump not to take military action. And they're using all those, as I said in the beginning, it's going to be like with Iraq and the neocons, all of that. They are pressuring him to be more isolationist. Let's not get involved and this, and we'll get bogged down. All those, that expression, bogged down. And so far, Trump is not listening to them so far. And I really hope he doesn't. And, on one last note, I would say about the disgusting international community. I hate that word. But you realize that Iran sits on the Human Rights Council at the United Nations. And do you realize, as you did point out earlier a little bit, you mentioned this, that when everyone was quoting, oh, what's going on in Gaza and what Israel is doing to the Gazans, notice silence on what the Iranian regime is doing to its own people. It is just outrageous. And that's another reason that it is necessary to defeat this regime, along with its Western apologists who ought to be ashamed of themselves.
So you're 100% right on the last issue there, where there's the so-called human rights activists who are out there demonstrating at Columbia University in New York and at British universities, and Australian universities and Canadian universities, Palestine, on this issue of the regime massacring its people, right? A totalitarian regime, right? Authoritarian with an ideology. So it's
and a theocracy.
A theocracy. A gangster regime, a corrupt regime, abusing its people. And it should be, it's a regime that's against gay people, it's against feminism. Women can't walk around safely without covering their head and so forth. And you'd think, this would be an issue on university campuses across the West. And yes, for some reason, when we see people demonstrate, it tends to be a few Iranian expats, right? And that's the sad story here indeed. And it says a lot about the intellectual milieu which is going along in much of the West. On your issue of Trump, and I think we're getting to the end of our time, and it's correct, within MAGA you have a strong isolationist tendency. They don't want to repeat what they see as the mistakes of Afghanistan and Iraq with overreach and boots on the ground. And one can actually understand that to a certain extent. And Trump so far, when he's used military force like in the 12-Day War or against the Nigerian Islamists, he goes in, he makes a strike, and he leaves. Same with Venezuela, right? He's very judicious. He's very surgical with the way he uses military force. And I think he's so far, we're a year and a bit into his presidency. Not even, no, only soon we have a whole year. But I think he's shown that you can avoid, so far, dangerous commitments that get you bogged down and so forth. You can use military force in a way that is smart, effective, ruthless, powerful, but you don't get bogged down. And we'll see how that will apply in the coming days and weeks, how that applies in Iran. What I want to praise, and maybe we'll spend the last 3 minutes of our program talking about this, that President Trump did a long interview for the New York Times, which is interesting that he agreed to do the New York Times. They're not particularly nice to him a lot of the time.
Understatement.
Yes. And he said, though, something very interesting in that interview. He condemned anti-Semitism within the MAGA movement. He said there's no place in the MAGA movement for anti-Semitism. We've discussed it on this program. You've discussed it many times before, that certain anti-Semitic elements within the right of the United States have been given a platform, have been espousing these ideas. I think that the president, the leader of the MAGA movement, came out against that the way he did. I think that is deserving of praise.
Absolutely. And it shows another difference between him and his vice president. Because when J.D. Vance, a few days earlier, was asked about his position on anti-Semitism in the party or elsewhere, his response was one of those, it was like the leftist. He said, all forms of hate are bad. There's no place for all forms of hate. It's a way of not talking about anti-Semitism. And since his close buddy is Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson's son works for J.D. Vance, as in his spokesman's department, he's been winking to those bad elements in the Republican Party, or they're not even in the party so much as they are outside supporters of it. So it remains to be seen what will happen with that. But one thing I will say is that by our next podcast, who knows what amazing things will have happened by then. I am certain that something is going down this week.
We will wait and see. And I will see you again on these chairs for our broadcast next week. Until then, Ruthie.
Forward to it.
Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time.
Imagine earning your master's degree on top of Mount Carmel, where forest meets sea and where every day brings a new cultural, academic, and personal adventure. This is the multi-experience at Haifa International. Here, students from around the world live and learn together in Israel's most culturally diverse city, meeting new people, discovering new perspectives, and shaping their own Israel experience.
There's people from different countries, from different religions and different languages. Somehow we are all very similar.
At Haifa, academics meet real life. You don't just study, you experience Israel up close, explore Haifa's mountain ocean city life, and build global friendships that last a lifetime.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience. It opens your mind, your network, and your world.
Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
All right, CUFI. I know with security we got a late start and this is the last session. It looks like there's another session in your schedule. There's not. That one's been moved to tomorrow. But we wanted to talk to you guys because how many of you know that with increasing regularity, we're hearing, I'll just say some clowns, some people acting like clowns, using the airwaves to say things that are just outright lies concerning the Bible, concerning Christianity, concerning Christian support for the nation of Israel, concerning Christian support for the Jewish people. So I asked my friend Gabe, we're both lawyers, don't hold it against us, we're the good lawyers. Christian, Jew. I was like, can we just come on and do a little quick jam sesh? And you and I ask each other questions for the audience. We have more Jewish people in the audience than ever before. And of course, the majority of our audience is Christian. Yes, clap for our Jewish brothers and sisters.
I'm gonna cut Sandy off 1 second. I just want to share one thing, which I didn't tell her I was going to share. We were text messaging just last week or maybe 2 weeks ago about some craziness that was going on with people on the right using the Bible and Christian texts against Israel and against the Jewish people. And we're having this heated back and forth. Obviously, we're on the same side of this stuff. And then she said, we should have this conversation on stage. And I said, in front of 3,000 people? She said, yeah, why not? Let's give them what they want to talk about. So here we are.
Give the people what they want. So we'll get right into it. I'll start. Gabe, last year you were here at our summit. Gabe hosted a panel masterfully. We were talking about the threat of isolationism. And we have seen that threat grow. And not allowing the concept of America first to be morphed into this concept of America only, and specifically to the exclusion of the state of Israel. We know where our president stands, thank God. But how do you think that we are doing with the broader movement on that issue?
It's a critical question. When we were here last year talking about isolationism, it was almost in the weeds, right? People were like, why are we really talking about this issue? We're talking about people with podcasts and comics that are just spewing nonsense, right? Like, it's not that important. But it turns out that it's very important. I think we're seeing a realization of a theory called the horseshoe theory that people know, which is that political theory is not linear. It's more of a horseshoe, or really more of a circle, where when you get to the ends, they start looking the same. And we're seeing now, right as we got comfortable on the political right, let's say, or in the conservative movement, right as we got comfortable saying all the anti-Semitic anti-Israel nonsense, that resides on the left. Right? On the right, it might exist on the streets, but it doesn't exist in politics or in political discourse or in anything mainstream. Just as we finish saying that sentence to ourselves, we saw the horseshoe theory. And we see now the right doing the same thing. They still haven't reached the level of dictating policy that was proven by Trump's courageous attack of Iran, because there were voices in the administration to the contrary, trying to convince them not to get involved. It turns out those voices still don't rule the day, but it means we have a lot of work to do.
Thank God. Thank God. All right, now you go. We should call this Ask a Jew, Ask a Gentile, but I got voted down. Now you go.
I don't know what gives me away, by the way. Anyways. So it's really hard, as I know what I know and I know what I don't know. Okay, so it's hard when you hear, Sandy, Christian leaders or purported Christian leaders, or people who seem to be at least of high intellect, using texts, Christian theology, not in the way you use it, right, but to the contrary. Even we saw an interview recently of someone whose name rhymes with Parlson, let's say, with a senator that's fantastic from the great state of Texas, Ted Cruz.
Yeehaw!
Almost ridiculing him by saying, what do you mean, I'm going to bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse Israel? Is that the state of Israel? Sort of using this replacement theory theology that we see so much in Christianity. And from the outside, not being a Christian, I turn to friends like you to say, help me understand this. So, Sandy, help us understand this.
Gabe sent me a video, and he was like, what do you think? I said, I listened to 30 seconds of it, and I can take down the argument in 15. Because, thank God, hopefully the most people in this room, A, know that efforts to use religion to drive a wedge between Christians and Jews is nothing new. It's been happening since the first century. John Chrysostom of Constantine, the Crusaders, the Spanish Inquisitors, Martin Luther. Hitler did not invent Jew hatred. The Holocaust did not begin at Auschwitz. It began when spiritual leaders of the time were starting to sow seeds of hatred within their congregations based on the writings of people like Martin Luther and the predecessors that came before him. The foundations of modern anti-Semitism since the creation of the State of Israel, of course, it's the world's oldest hatred. We see it very clearly in the Bible from the Pharaohs in the time of the Pharaohs. But I would say modern anti-Semitism since the creation of the State of Israel since the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, not the creation of the State of Israel, has nothing to do with land. They were persecuting Jews long before 1948. It has nothing to do with words like apartheid and colonization. It has to do with separating Jesus Christ from his Jewish heritage and the Jewish people and his Jewish identity. Because that fact does not reconcile with all of these people who are using the Bible as a sword and a shield to inflict harm. They're using it as a shield to be like, I'm a Christian, I would never, and then using it as a sword to lie and say, let me introduce you to my Savior, Jesus Christ. I don't make fun of that. He is my Savior too. Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. I'm a Christian, he's a Jew. They forget that last part. Jesus Christ wasn't a Christian, not for one day. The Bible was written by 40 authors, wasn't a Baptist in the bunch. You cannot praise the dead Jews of the Bible like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and curse the Jews that live across the street from your house. Being an anti-Semitic Christian is like being a kosher hog. It's not possible and it doesn't exist. Oh, it's my turn now. Did that answer? Well, we're just getting started. It's fine.
Just to interject one thing.
Go.
I was speaking to one of the pastors that are in the room today, and thank you, the guy I sat with at lunch. And we were talking about how in so many churches, unfortunately, the Palestinian Christian community has inverted not their opinions, but history and facts themselves. The fact that they were driven out of the State of Israel, so many of them, by the Muslims that were in power, or when they're in power today, like in Bethlehem. And we see people that are dishonest with an agenda going on shows all over the world and speaking and influencing churches and Christians all over the world, totally inverting the truth. And one thing that we've seen after October 7th is that what's up is down and what's down is up. Everything is upside down. But it's up to people that are firm believers of religion, of the Bible, of my Bible, of yours, to tell people that there are absolute truths. There are absolute truths that go beyond the waves of the day, the lies of the day. Those things, the truths of the Bible, go from generation to generation, and it's our job to stand with them, and also just to stand with absolute truth and don't let people twist it for us, because we're not going to let them get between us.
Amen. Gabe, I know that in the broader Jewish community, there has always been a dialogue, but not necessarily consensus, about the role that the modern state of Israel plays in your faith. Do you think that that has changed since 10/7 in the Jewish community? And if so, how so?
I love this question. And I know I didn't write it, she wrote it. The state of Israel and Zionism is an integral part of being a Jew. We pray for Zion and Jerusalem 3 times a day, multiple times within those 3 times a day. For thousands of years, when we were kicked out of the land of Israel, there was always a presence there, but when we were kicked out, we prayed and mourned for the state of Israel, for the land of Israel, every single day, every year, whether we were living in Russia, in Iran, in Iraq, in South America, in Turkey, it doesn't matter where. We turn to Jerusalem to pray 3 times a day. It's an integral part of who we are. And the establishment or the reestablishment of Jewish sovereignty on the land of Israel in 1948, which, by the way, is the same year that Abraham was born. Go figure, there's no coincidences. It is the realization of a prophecy, of the ingathering of the exiles, of bringing the Jews back from all 4 corners of the world to the land of Israel. And that is what Zionism is today. Now, I was looking before online, what percentage of Jews are Zionists? And I don't care what the numbers say. It's the majority, by the way. Some people say 95%, 80%, doesn't matter. The delta, those who don't, they just have never opened the Bible before. They've never opened a siddur, a prayer book before. They don't understand. We have 20% of Jewish Democrats today in New York that openly support and supported Mamdani in the primary in New York. Someone who openly calls for the genocide of Jews by globalizing the Intifada. These days, if you use code words, you can get away with anything. Those are the same people who aren't sure about the role of Judaism. Now, after October 7th, there's been a real reawakening of Jews all over the world, because the anti-Semites have reminded us, Sandy, those who needed to be reminded, that we're Jewish. Now, when they come after the Jews, they don't come after Democrats or Republicans or Orthodox or Reform or Conservative, like the animal who walked into a synagogue in Pittsburgh. He said, I want to kill all the Jews. All Jews must die, was what he quoted. And I just want to say one thing, because there's been a lot said today about anti-Semitism. Despite the fact that we're at the highest levels of anti-Semitism since the Holocaust in the United States, based on all data, there's never been a better time in history to be a Jew than today. And I'll tell you why. Because we are living in a time of revealed miracles. If you see what's happening in Israel today, it's nothing short than God himself showing his face upon the world and saying, I'm protecting the people of Israel.
Amen.
So Sandy, I'm going to throw away my last question to you and ask you something totally different. What do you guys think?
I'm not scared. Let's go. Cameras off.
So we're seeing this year, you mentioned it, I was thinking about it as you mentioned it, we're seeing the most number of Jews attending a Christian event here in Washington, D.C. from all over the world. What do you make of it? We've had years of evangelicals reaching out, by the way, writing checks as well, supporting Jewish causes, supporting the state of Israel, not just by word, but in actual action. But the receipt on the Jewish side is always tepid. You know, where it's like, what do the evangelicals want from us? Are there strings attached to this? Are they trying to convert us? You know, those are legitimate questions that are asked, and people are afraid to say it out loud. But I've heard my friend Marissa Straight say, we're all one family here, so let's have real conversations. Yeah. Tell me what it feels like, first of all, to be passing that sort of barrier where now you're seeing the Jewish community really welcome and in a warm way recognize all the work that your community is doing.
Well, first of all, it's extremely heartwarming because we have always said we're going to do it whether you like it or not. So we're really happy that some in the community are starting to like it. Because and you know my heart when I say this, we don't just do it for the Jewish community. We must do it for ourselves. The Bible teaches us many things, and then the Bible tells us many things. And we don't pray about the things that the Bible tells us to do. We don't pray about whether we should go to church. We don't pray about whether we should honor our parents. We don't pray about whether we should tithe. Similarly, we don't pray about whether we should support Israel and her people because the Bible very clearly tells us to do it. So the fact that we have so many friends and allies in the Jewish community now coming and feeling confident and feeling comfortable to stand shoulder to shoulder with us means that the message that Pastor Hagee has been preaching, when I say this, every day of my life. I was born the year he started Night to Honor Israel. I was maybe 6 before I realized I wasn't a Jew. I don't know any other way than to love the Jewish people as myself. That means that for 40 years, when he has been saying Israel, God, and the Jewish people are a three-legged stool, and you don't get one without the other, and the integrity of God does not allow him to disinherit his firstborn son, Israel, whom he loved and called out of Egypt. Finally, the message is resonating beyond our own faith, and I attribute it to a miracle of God above, that the Jewish people in my lifetime are now coming into Christians United for Israel, knowing that we stand with them, not for them, but for ourselves. Thank you. So now, but I still have a last question for you. You saw in the video, Gabe is a great friend. He's a prominent member of the Jewish community in South Florida. He's a lawyer, he's a politician, elected official. But what do you say to the members of the Jewish community that are still a little bit cagey concerning Christian support for Israel?
As you ask that question, I think about my kids. I have 5 beautiful daughters.
5
Thank
girls.
God.
And I'm going to interrupt him. He has 5 beautiful daughters, the oldest of which is going to leave to serve in IDF on Wednesday. And Gabe is here with us. But he's going to be at home by Wednesday to take her. But yes, girl dad to the core.
5 a.m. flight to make sure I don't miss it. But first of all, please add her and all the soldiers to your prayers.
Yes, we will.
So I think of my daughters when you ask that question, because at the root of the question is, for me, is the image of a tree. And we have to make sure that, if I'm speaking out to the Jewish community, we have to make sure that before we go out to the world, that first we dig our roots really, really deep down. And what does that mean? There's a crisis in our country within the Jewish community of apathy and of illiteracy. There's a crisis of apathy where people really, a large percentage of Jews in America, because of the comforts and the promise of America, which still exists today, and we're so glad to be here. Because of that, many people have put aside, for at least 1 or 2 generations, have put aside Jewish learning the Bible, learning the Torah as we call it, learning Jewish laws and customs and practicing a Jewish life and giving your kids a Jewish education, going to Jewish schools, getting your roots down deep so you know who you are. And once you know where you are, again, I always think of the tree, I'm sorry, but I think of the branches. And once the tree is deep in the ground, you can grow, and it can grow branches that you can go out. And if you have deep roots in who you are, you don't have to be afraid of anybody or of anything. Certainly not of people that are here to help you and to be your friends. right? So it's about having certainty and certitude about who you are as a Jewish people. And we have to know that we can be afraid of whatever we want. You can think whatever you want. But come sit down with my friend Sandy, or with Pastor John Hagee, or his wife Diana. Speak to any of them, and you'll know within 5 minutes, if not within a minute, that you're sitting with people who love and support the state of Israel, and love and support the Jewish people. And today we can use a friend like that. So I just want to say, since I have the mic to close, thank you. Thank you to you, and thank you to your parents. If you spend 5 minutes with her daughter, Olivia, just shout out to Olivia, you'll know that this does not end in this family. It continues because they're teaching their kids and their families what it means to be a strong, proud person, proud of who they are, and out there in the world doing good things. And if there's more of that in this world, we'll be having conferences only celebrating amazing things. Amen. Because we'll be living in messianic times. Thank you so
Amen.
much.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you all.
Israel's only English news channel, bringing you the headlines that matter every hour, straight from the center of where it's all unfolding.
Welcome back to ILTV On the Hour. I'm Kalev Ben David, coming to you live from Israel, breaking down all of the biggest headlines coming out of the region. And here are the latest developments. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued one of his toughest warnings yet to Iran, saying if the Islamic Republic attempts to assassinate him, the United States would respond so forcefully that Iran would be wiped off the face of this earth.
They shouldn't be doing it, but I've left notification. Anything ever happens, we're going to blow the whole country is going to get blown up. So we've, originally Biden should have said something, when they made a statement. We always said, why isn't Biden saying anything? Because he didn't. But a president has to defend a president. Like if I were here and they were making that threat to somebody, not even a president, but somebody like they did with me, I would absolutely hit them so hard. But I have very firm instructions. Anything happens, they're going to wipe them off the face of this earth.
Now, Trump's remarks follow recent comments by Iranian officials warning the president against taking any action against the Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, calling such steps a cause for total war. Now, while President Trump said strong military options do remain available, he has not yet ordered a strike, and it remains unclear just how far Washington is willing to go if Iran's leadership continues to threaten American leaders and to massacre its own people who are protesting against the Ayatollah's regime. Meanwhile, the U.S. is continuing its buildup of military forces in the region, with the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln expected to arrive later this week in Mideast waters. Turning to Gaza now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted President Trump's invitation to join the newly formed Board of Peace. This according to a statement from the Prime Minister's office. The initiative, led and chaired for life by President Trump, is aimed at resolving global conflicts with an initial focus on the Gaza Strip. Israel now joins Argentina, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Hungary, Kazakhstan, Morocco, the United Arab Emirates, Kosovo, Vietnam, and today Egypt in accepting this invitation. Other countries such as Sweden, Norway, and France have rejected rejoining the board, while other nations are still weighing the offer, some reportedly being concerned over an invitation that was extended to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Board of Peace is supposed to oversee the executive board administering Gaza, which includes officials from Turkey and Qatar, despite Israel's objections to their inclusion. Diplomats have also warned that the new Board of Peace could undermine the role of the United Nations, but its supporters say it could offer a new path for international conflict resolution. Speaking to reporters, Trump also denounced the role of the UN as not particularly helpful.
Do you want your Board of Peace to replace the UN?
Well, it might. I mean, the UN just hasn't been very helpful. I'm a big fan of the UN potential, but it has never lived up to its potential. The UN should have settled every one of the wars that I settled. I never went to them. I never even thought to go to them. They should be able to settle those wars. They don't. I believe you got to let the UN continue because the potential is so great.
And let's take a break from this heavy news and go to something from the entertainment field. Noam Beten has been chosen to represent Israel at the Eurovision Song Contest in 2026. Beten secured his place last night after winning the reality competition The Next Star, defeating 3 other finalists. Speaking after his victory, Beten said, "I will do my utmost, everything I can to represent the country." This year's Eurovision will be held in Vienna, Austria, with Israel scheduled to compete in the first semifinal on May 12th. Of course, Israel's participation comes against a backdrop of political tensions and calls for boycotts, but Israel organizers confirm Israel remains fully scheduled to compete. Good luck to Noam. And that ends this update. Thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS. This week, it's all eyes on Iran as the courageous Iranian people continue their pursuit of freedom after more than 2 weeks of continuous protests. We'll discuss the latest developments as well as what the U.S. and Europe should do to support the Iranian people. First, we need to have a conversation about the global hypocrisy we see in response to the Islamic Republic's obscene crimes against humanity. Since these protests began just over 2 weeks ago, the regime has committed egregious human rights atrocities and violations of international law. Yet where is the coverage of this? When Israel fights a defensive, legally justified war against Hamas, the media takes Hamas numbers as fact and accuses Israel of crimes against humanity with zero evidence. When the Islamic Republic murders upwards of 12,000 of their own people, they report 500 to 600 casualties and hardly cover the explicit violations of international law for which there is a plethora of evidence. Now, since the protests began, the regime has been using unmarked ambulances in order to transport IRGC forces to suppress the protesters. They've kidnapped protesters and used them as human shields. They've repeatedly used live fire and even grenades against protesters. They've intentionally targeted protesters by shooting them in the eyes and in the chest. They've attacked hospitals. According to sources on the ground, they've also refused to allow injured protesters into hospitals for treatment. All of these are blatant violations of international law. Yet there are no emergency flotillas being organized by Greta. There are no celebrity pins or speeches at the Golden Globes from Mark Ruffalo. There's no crying over murdered Iranian children by Miss Rachel. And there are no student encampments being organized. In fact, there isn't even mainstream media discussion of these shameful behaviors, because none of that fits the narrative that much of the left-wing media has been invested in promoting for years, a worldview in which everything Western is inherently evil, and any third worldist jihadist ideology is automatically cast as liberation. This isn't reality, but it is the lens through which both the woke left and the woke right are being conditioned to view the world. And this didn't happen by accident. It's the result of decades of ideological subversion by regimes like the Islamic Republic of Iran. And there's a reason that outlets like the BBC continue to platform so-called experts who function as apologists for the regime, including figures like Trita Parsi. The truth coming out of Iran shatters the third worldist mythology that they've been selling since 1979, and they don't want their audiences to hear it. They want you to believe that Iranians reclaiming their roots, rejecting occupation and colonization by Islam as Islamophobia. And they've even tried to silence Iranians who have spoken out against this. It's the same reason that we saw endless coverage of Gaza presenting Hamas as the victims, yet utter silence on famine in Sudan, or on massacres of Christians in Nigeria, on kidnapping and slaughter of Druze in Syria and beyond. Don't fall for this. Pay attention to what's happening in Iran and be the voice of the Iranian people. Well, today we're going to focus exclusively on exactly what's happening inside of Iran from multiple angles and what needs to happen in Iran. We're now in the third week of a nationwide uprising in Iran, and what's happening right now is the largest protest movement since 2009 against the Islamic Republic, both in terms of scale and in terms of intent. For 3 consecutive weeks, millions of Iranians have been in the streets across all 31 provinces of the country. And this isn't limited to a handful of urban centers or to a particular demographic group. It includes major cities, small towns, peripheral regions, Iranian minorities, working class communities that have not mobilized historically at this level. The geographic breadth of the uprising alone makes it unprecedented. And the regime understands this, which is why it has responded with a near total internet and communications blackout that has now lasted close to a week. We're talking phone and internet, leaving the people with only Starlink. And people inside Iran can't contact their families, cannot access emergency services, and can't document what's happening to them in real time. It's not a security measure. It's a deliberate attempt to isolate their own population and commit violence without witnesses. Despite this, protests have not subsided. They've intensified. What we're seeing on the ground now is not just marches or chants, but actual direct confrontation between the protesters and the regime's security apparatus. People are clashing with IRGC units, setting fire to regime buildings, and seizing police stations. In some cases, protesters are actively attacking Basij and IRGC forces in order to prevent them from conducting mass arrests in their neighborhoods. This organized defensive action by civilians who understand exactly what happens when security forces gain control of an area is incredibly brave. Throughout all of this, the political message coming from the streets has also been consistent and remarkably coherent for a large group of people. Protesters are openly chanting the name of Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi and responding to his calls for national coordination and civic action. This isn't incidental. It reflects a level of unity around a single opposition figure that the regime has never had to contend with, at least at this scale. And the regime's response has followed the same familiar pattern. It's escalated violence while simultaneously blaming foreign powers for the uprising, claiming that the protests are being directed or orchestrated by outside actors rather than a result of their own failures and brutality. Now, this narrative is not designed for Iranians. It's designed for Western consumption and for diplomatic cover. According to reporting by Iran International, at least 12,000 people have been killed so far or seriously injured since the uprising began. CBS reported that up to 20,000 have been killed in just a few days. Even the treatment of the dead and injured has become a system of state extortion. Families are being forced to pay ransoms of up to 1 billion tomans and sign false statements claiming that their loved ones were members of the Basij, the police forces, in order to recover the bodies of their loved ones. This practice serves multiple purposes for the regime. First, it punishes families financially. And it also manipulates casualty statistics. It attempts to rewrite that narrative of who is being killed in order basically to lay the groundwork for mass executions that they want to carry out. Now, we know from sources on the ground that hospitals around the country are overwhelmed. Eye clinics in particular are reporting a surge in patients. And this is because security forces are intentionally shooting protesters in the head and in the eyes. Doctors have described treating waves of patients with gunshot wounds to the head and to the chest, including children. This isn't crowd control. It's punishment and deterrence through maiming their own people. At the same time, the regime is preparing the legal and propaganda infrastructure for mass executions. Officials have publicly announced that participation in protests will carry the death penalty for anyone taking part in these protests. In several locations, regime forces have actually set fire to dozens of shops and then blamed the protesters for the destruction in order to justify escalated repression. This is actually a very well-documented tactic of false flag attacks designed to portray uprisings as criminal rather than political and a civic rejection of the regime. For example, the regime shot down a Ukrainian commercial airliner, PS-752, that was full of their own citizens in an attempt to frame the United States. They got caught. They also blew up Cinema Rex in a terror attack in the 1970s, killing 377 Iranians, attempting to frame, again, others for that attack. The propaganda game is really this regime's DNA, and that's why the regime has begun broadcasting, in some cases fabricated footage, of alleged pro-regime gatherings after cutting off the internet and creating an information vacuum in which these claims can't be verified. Military-grade jammers have also been deployed to disrupt the limited Starlink signals, and security forces are even going door-to-door in areas where signals are detected in order to confiscate those devices. More than 10,000 Iranians have already been arrested, many of them disappearing into detention with no information provided to their families. In the United States, there have been strong statements of support from many members of Congress and senators like Lindsey Graham and John Fetterman. Across the political spectrum, the American government is increasingly supporting regime change. Now, President Trump has also continued to issue public encouragement to the Iranian people and threats to the regime, including a statement on January 13th calling on them to continue protesting and stating that help is on its way. Now, Iranians have responded by holding signs asking for his assistance inside Iran and by openly expressing expectations that the United States will not abandon them at this stage. They're even hanging signs renaming streets in Iran after Donald Trump. But every hour that he waits means more bloodshed. And this is why discussions of possible negotiations at this point are so dangerous. This week, Trump stated he was considering negotiations and that the regime itself had reached out to U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. But what is there to negotiate? 15,000 slaughtered versus 20,000? Negotiations with the Islamic Republic have never functioned as a means of de-escalation. They function as a delay mechanism that allows the regime to regroup, identify opposition networks, and crush internal dissent while the international community looks away. Any move in that direction would directly undercut the protesters and signal to the regime that time is on its side. Arguments against regime change often rely on claims that the outcome is unpredictable, but this claim doesn't hold up this time to scrutiny. For the first time, there is broad-based unity behind a single opposition figure and a clearly articulated transition framework. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has been working for years on a multi-point plan for a national transition that includes a referendum and structures designed to prevent state collapse. Iran isn't a failed state held together by foreign occupation. It's an ancient civilization with deep institutional memory that was hijacked by a political Islamist system in 1979. Under the Pahlavi dynasty, Iran became one of the most modern and economically dynamic countries in the world. Whatever criticism one has of monarchy, the historical record makes clear that Iran possesses the capacity to govern itself without descending into chaos. Comparisons to Iraq or Afghanistan are analytically lazy and actually historically inaccurate. Iranians aren't Arabs, and Islam came to that land as a result of colonization and occupation. It's foreign intervention. All the while, the foreign occupiers in the Islamic Republic are claiming that the uprising of the people is foreign. In the cultural sphere, the silence from certain activist movements has been just as revealing as the regime's violence. The same networks that mobilized en masse around Gaza seem to have no interest in the mass killings of Iranians. There have been no large-scale demonstrations, no celebrity letter campaigns, and no sustained media pressure. Instead, figures associated with these movements have repeated Islamic Republic talking points, claiming that this uprising is somehow a Zionist operation. Now, this assertion is totally detached from reality. Millions of Iranians are not risking their lives to protest for Israel. They're risking their lives for freedom for regime change. Attempts by Western activists to speak over Iranians and dictate what they supposedly want reflect a level of arrogance that's difficult to overstate. In some cases, this has escalated into open hostility. Iranian protesters have been confronted and attacked at rallies by Palestinian activists simply because Zionists also support the Iranian people. For example, when I was in London this weekend speaking at the protest before 30,000 Iranians, someone shouted "Free Palestine" in response to the Iranian calls for freedom. This has nothing to do with Palestinians, it has nothing to do with solidarity, and everything to do with ideological obsession. The idea that millions of Iranians are going to go out into the streets risking their lives to beg for freedom because of Israel is totally outrageous and something that the regime itself was actually repeating. These people are risking it all, and still you'll have some of these leftists pontificate about how they know better than what the actual people of Iran are saying. That Reza Pahlavi is not what they want, or they don't want foreign intervention, or they don't support Israel. Who the hell are these people to speak over Iranians? This is all a part of this third worldist death cult ideology that is the Free Palestine movement today, and they're finally exposing themselves for what they really are. And yes, as I mentioned before, media coverage has been deeply flawed. The BBC, for example, initially minimized the protest and framed them as merely economic in nature, rather than a clear demand from the people to end the regime. When coverage increased, it consistently avoided acknowledging the open support for Reza Pahlavi. VOA Farsi, funded by U.S. taxpayers, has been similarly accused of omissions and intentionally avoiding any positive mentions of the Crown Prince. Now, for BBC, this continues a long pattern that actually dates back to 1979, when the BBC provided extensive platforming to Khomeini and helped shape a misleading narrative about the fall of the Shah, the fall of the monarchy, portraying the Shah as a dictator for firing the Prime Minister Mossadegh, who in fact was violating the Iranian constitution, not the Shah. The regime has been extraordinarily effective in the information war. I gotta give it to them, particularly in Western spaces, where it has promoted the claim that this uprising is Islamophobic or Zionist rather than what it actually is, a popular revolt against an Islamist system that's colonized a non-Arab society for nearly 5 decades. Now, support for the Iranian people from Zionists is actually rooted in history. The connection between Jews and Iran dates back to Cyrus the Great and a shared civilizational experience that stands in direct opposition to political Islam. It's entirely logical that Israelis and Jews support Iranians seeking to defeat the very same ideology that threatens us today. Despite what the Western woke mob claims, many Iranians have called for Israeli and American assistance, including help with internet access, logistical support, cyber operations, and yes, targeted assassinations and direct action against the IRGC. But what about Europe? What can they do? Well, so far, Roberta Metsola of the European Parliament has banned all Islamic Republic diplomats from entering the building. The UK has announced new sanctions against regime officials and has summoned the regime's ambassador over the mass-scale killings. Germany has also summoned the ambassador, and the German foreign minister has called the regime illegitimate. Great steps in the right direction, albeit 47 years late. But there's much more that must be done. Designating the IRGC as a terror organization at both the EU and UK level is something that should have been done years ago. Now, the UK is one of the key locations that the IRGC uses to launder their money, and that is precisely why the UK government has balked at designating them as a terror group. They know they'd actually have to act, and they are moral cowards. Billions of dollars of the Iranian people is tied up in UK companies and real estate owned by regime officials and their family members and allies. The situation is similar in Canada and other countries. This must stop, because part of dismantling the IRGC requires bankrupting them, not just bombing their leaders. Europe must proscribe the IRGC, but they must also expel the regime's diplomats. Yes, it's time. Shutter the embassies of the regime and freeze the assets of the regime operators that are working in Europe. Remember, the IRGC is not a conventional military force. It's separate from the army, And it actually exists to protect the system, which in English is the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. Political power in it is vested in exclusively Islamic jurists rather than in the people. This is the entire system upon which the Islamic Republic is structured, and it's what mandates Sharia law. That's why you can take out 20 mullahs, you can take out the Ayatollah, but until the system of political Islam is deconstructed, Iran won't be free. In order to achieve that, we need Europe to be held accountable and to help deconstruct the IRGC by freezing those assets, which have been stolen from the Iranian people in the billions. The Iranian people have made their demands clear. They're asking the world to stop misinterpreting them, stop speaking over them, and stop providing the regime with the time and cover that it needs to survive. The question is no longer what do Iranians want. The question is whether the world is actually prepared to respond this time. Well, to wrap things up, let's finish out the week with our good, bad, and ugly stories of this week. For our good story, we have seen an incredible presence of Iranians, actually all over the world, rising up in solidarity with their fellow citizens inside of Iran. Now, from Toronto to Paris to Berlin to London, protesters are calling for the international community to act in support of Iranians and are also targeting the embassies and removing the flags of the Islamic Republic. I took part in the protests in London over the weekend and spoke before 30,000 Iranians. Let's take a look at the scenes.
Keir Starmer, if the Iranian people in the millions can risk their lives, even children, teenagers, to stand in the streets and protest against the Islamic Republic, you can get off your ass and designate the IRGC as a terror organization. Am Israel Chai, Bayandeh Iran.
And now our bad story of the week. The truth is there are a lot of horror stories coming from the Islamic Republic this week, but I think it's important to show straight from the horse's mouth what the regime itself is saying about protesters. Regime officials have stated explicitly that the regime will execute anyone involved with these protests. As a reminder, more than 10,000 people have already been arrested, and reports indicate that up to 20,000 have already been murdered by this regime. Take a look at what this official had to say.
باید عرض کنم کسانی که با تخریب و آتش زدن اموال عمومی و با درگیری و تمرد نسبت به مأمورین حافظ امنیت با سلاح ایستاده‌اند، چه سلاح سرد چه سلاح گرم. اتهام اینا محاربه است و ما طبق قانون و با قاطعیت با اونها رفتار میکنیم و هیچ مماشاتی در کار نیست و قاطعانه انشالله برخورد میکنیم و سریع که درس عبرتی باشه برای مزدورانی که در زمین دشمن حرکت میکنن.
And finally, last but not least, our ugly story of the week. I spoke about how the regime is known for fake news and false flag operations, but this week, since they shut down the internet, they've been claiming the protests aren't happening at all is well, showing old footage of pro-regime events and claiming that they have the support of the people. They don't, and these actions are proving more pathetic with every passing day. Let's just hope they aren't in power by the next episode of Axis of Truth. And that does it for this week's episode. We'll be back next week with more updates on the situation in Iran, including interviews and more stories from here in Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be sure to follow me on social media, Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week on Axis of Truth. And turning now to Aliyah, immigration to Israel. The government has approved a major national plan to encourage mass immigration from Israel from Western countries as anti-Semitic incidents surged dramatically since October 7, 2023. The program offers financial incentives, housing support, and fast-tracked bureaucracy aimed at turning growing interest into actual immigration. ILTV's Devo Klein has the details.
Against the backdrop of a sharp and alarming rise in anti-Semitism across the West, Israel has greenlit a wide-ranging national plan to encourage large-scale Aliyah from countries including France, Britain, Canada, and Australia. The news comes as official data shows anti-Semitic incidents skyrocketing, up more than 500% in Canada, 450% in Britain, 350% in France, and nearly 400% in Australia over the past 3 years. At the same time, applications for Aliyah have surged, but officials say too many potential immigrants are still getting stuck in bureaucracy or struggling with housing, employment, and absorption concerns. The new program seeks to remove those barriers. It includes fast-tracked visa approvals within 30 days and a full digital system for document transfers. Financially, the plan offers monthly absorption grants for the first year, up to 3,400 shekels for large families, or about $1,000 without a rental requirement. Additional housing assistance will follow, including enhanced rent support for those settling in the north, the south, and Judea and Samaria. The program also expands Hebrew studies, educational support for children, academic and professional guidance, and incentives for employers to hire new immigrants. Local authorities will receive extra funding if they agree to absorb larger numbers of newcomers. The overall budget is expected to reach hundreds of millions of shekels through 2029, with implementation led by Aliyah and Integration Minister Ophir Sofer and the Interministerial Task Force. Officials say the goal is clear: to turn today's fear and pressure on Jewish communities abroad into a historic opportunity to strengthen Israel demographically, both economically and socially, at a time of national and global challenge.
It starts with my grandfather telling his life sort of until the war and after the war, leaving those 4 years sort of like as an empty window, because that was the empty window in his life. Then it explores all the different characters I met along the way, dozens of people who I've spoken to. And then it wraps up at the end with those 4 years, with the reveal of what happened there, why was it so significant. I think that after October 7th, a lot of these assumptions, I don't think they crashed, but we were shaken a little bit. We're taken back to the same kind of insecurities we had in the 1940s.
Hello and welcome to the ILTV podcast. I'm Ayan Hoffman, executive editor of ILTV, and we are so happy to welcome back our viewers and our listeners. Today I brought in a guest who is a former journalist and a very strong new author, the author of Zadie's Bands. Welcome, Aaron Heller.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's good to be here.
Great. So, Aaron, I want to first start out. You have this book, Zadie's Bands. It's your first book.
Yep.
Tell me, what led you to write this book?
Well, I guess the genesis of it is it's a lifelong project. I mean, basically, ever since I was a little kid, I knew that my grandfather had served in World War II. There was even a picture of him in his wedding photo. He was with uniform. But that was all we knew. We couldn't talk about it. It was sort of a taboo thing. It was, the greatest generation who liked to be the strong, silent types. And as you know, I'm a journalist and I'm inquisitive and interested. And all my life I sort of tried to get at it. And he never would budge. He never would talk about it. And I left it eventually. And then I became a journalist and discovered that I had this ability to talk to people and get really good stories out of them. And I did dozens about Holocaust survivors and World War II veterans. And right when he was about to turn 90, I said, you know what, I got to get back to this. I mean, this is my grandfather. I've done it with dozens of other people. And that's how our journey began, really, when it was about his 90th birthday. And then that sort of kicked off a 10, 11-year journey where I took 8 trips from Israel to Toronto and countless calls and messages in between. And that was the genesis of this, and it evolved into a bigger exploration of the whole theme of Jews fighting in World War II.
And you say Toronto because I'm assuming you're from Toronto.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was born in Boston, but my family's from Toronto. Both my parents are from Toronto, and the entire extended family is there. So it sort of opened up a window into sort of like an unknown part. Also the personal journey of discovering what it was in him, but what he represented also as far as Canadian Jewish soldiers and Jewish soldiers in a wider sense.
Which I'm sure is what people are going to be able to read about in the book. I mean, I would like you to tell me a little bit about the plot and the characters. Bring me into the story. Give me a little bit of history. What are we reading?
Well, we're reading basically a story that explores the larger issue of the Jewish soldiers in World War II. And it's surprising to me because I also came across, it's not something we grew up on, not in Israel, not in the diaspora. when people think about World War II and the Jewish experience, the immediate association is the Holocaust, as it should be. 6 million Jews were killed. But there's a flip side to that. There's another story, and that is 1.5 million Jews served in the various Allied. And every time I drop that stat, people are shocked by it because they have no idea.
It's a huge number.
It is a really big number, and that includes the Red Army and the Americans and the British and all the Allies. And every single place there was a battle in World War II, there were Jews involved in it, in every single front. And not only that, 250,000 of them died in battle.
Of the 1.5 million.
Yeah, and so people are like, they know about the victims of the camps and of the Nazis. These are soldiers who went down. So it sort of triggered in me a real interest to discover this. And like I said, it all starts with my grandfather, trying to get his story. And he was very difficult to get him to open up. But slowly, it sort of peeled like the onion every time. And it began through an exploration of his friends. And as it turns out, one of his best friends was a real bona fide World War II hero. And I discovered his story and wrote about that and published his story throughout these years in various magazines. And then afterwards, through that, it opened up this new window to the volunteers who came to Israel. And that was the Mahal volunteers, who another unknown legacy of the 48 war, the huge impact that the foreign volunteers had. And so, like I said, it started out on a personal angle and it just widened out to something larger. And I think the connecting theme is my grandfather's story and these overlooked elements of Jewish history.
And I'm assuming that in the book there's a combination of the personal, the narrative of your grandfather, then kind of building out with the narrative, as you described, with the history up until, the end of the story.
Exactly. It starts with my grandfather telling his life sort of until the war and after the war, leaving those 4 years sort of like as an empty window, because that was the empty window in his life. Then it explores all the different characters I met along the way, dozens of people who I've spoken to. And then it wraps up at the end with those 4 years, with the reveal of what happened there, why was it so significant, and how did it leave this shadow for his life and for so many others.
And the book's very relevant today because, we're going through kind of an existential threat regarding the rise in anti-Semitism, the October 7th massacre, which of course was the largest, massacre to Jews since the Holocaust. Tell me, we've talked a little bit beforehand, and you were talking about how some of the lessons that you learned in writing this book really apply today and that we could all learn from it as well. Can you share some of those ideas?
Sure. And it's interesting how it evolved into that because, like I said, I started on